So good morning, everyone. Ms. Jones, are you available? You're there?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, good. So with that, I will go ahead and call this meeting to order. The meeting has been posted in accordance with open meeting law and can be accessed. I'll go ahead and have Ms. Jones call the roll at this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Brooks,
Here.
Senator Cancella,
Here.
Senator Dennis,
Here.
Senator Goycochea,
Here.
Senator Keffer,
Here.
Senator Parks,
Here.
Senator Saddlemeyer,
Here.
Vice Chair Woodhouse,
Here.
Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson,
Here.
Assemblyman Frierson,
Here.
Assemblywoman Tolles for Assemblyman Hambrick,
Here.
Assemblywoman Howdeggy,
Here.
Assemblyman Kramer,
Yes, here.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno,
Here.
Assemblywoman Neal,
Here.
Assemblywoman Spiegel, Assemblywoman Monk,
Here.
Assemblywoman Swank,
Here.
Assemblywoman Backus,
Here.
Assemblywoman Titus,
Here.
Assemblyman Wheeler,
Here.
Chair Carlton.
And I am here. And Ms. Jones, if you would please mark Assemblywoman Spiegel absent, and the committee sends its deep condolences on the passing of her mother earlier this week. So she is absent, excused today.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
We will go to public comment. As published on the agenda, public comment may be made via mail, email, submitted by fax, or by calling into the designated number on the agenda and following the sign-in directions on the agenda. Due to time constraints, public comment will be limited to 2 minutes per speaker, and I will take up to approximately 45 minutes of public comment at the beginning of this meeting. An additional opportunity to make public comment will be available at the end of this meeting. Also, committee members and members of the public, since this was a very quickly posted meeting to deal with expeditious work programs, we are sharing the resources with another committee. So therefore, we do have some time constraints this morning. The chair would like to have our business finished by noon, if possible, but we still want to make sure that we have a thorough vetting of all the items. So with that, if our excellent LCB broadcast and production services staff would queue up anyone that is in line for public comment, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If the caller with the last three digits of 282, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Yes, Chairwoman Carlton, members of the committee, this is William Stanley representing the Southern Nevada Building Trades Union. I was offered testimony this morning on item D3. We are in support of the studies that are recommended here, specifically item number 2, having to deal with supply chain. As many of you may know, we are very fortunate in the construction industry throughout the pandemic. We have remained essential, and for the most part, our members have remained on the job. However, we have experienced many supply chain issues, especially in the last mile, getting them into the city and onto the job sites. We believe understanding that logjam is critical to the economic recovery as we start to think about what it looks like on the other side of this pandemic. Additionally, these other studies we believe could be critical to understanding what the recovery in Southern Nevada and the state of Nevada as a whole will look like as we move forward. So we are in support of item D3, and we appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Next caller.
Madam Chair, the public line has no other callers at this time.
Thank you very much. So with that, I believe we can go ahead and proceed. Committee members, as usual, since this meeting is being conducted virtually, Senate Fiscal Analysis, Mr. Kompotek will be doing the roll call votes for us today. So with that, at this time, I believe I can turn the meeting over to Ms. Jones to address items C and D. Ms. Jones, take it away.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There are 3 work programs on item C. These were expeditious work programs submitted under NRS 353-225. And the committee decided not to hold a special meeting for these. So these items have been deemed approved. Staff has not identified any issues with these 3 work programs. Moving on to list D, item 1 on this list, no issues have been identified with that one. However, the remainder of the items on the list are being held for testimony. Numbers 2, 3, and 4 are all for the Governor's Office of Economic Development. While they're not interrelated, they are all for the same agency. Item 5 will be held for discussion, Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs. And then items 6 and 7, both for the Department of Health and Human Services, for the Division of Public and Behavioral Health. And that's all we have for now, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jones. I was made aware, I believe it was last evening, but my days and nights tend to run together lately, that I believe Senator Brooks would like to also make a comment or ask a quick question on item number D1. So we will just proceed through all of the D agenda at this time. So with that, we'll go ahead and go to item D1. If we could queue up our person for D1, and I will recognize Senator Brooks to ask his question and make his comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really just looking at the funding for the Secretary of State's office and at the upcoming elections and just the new way we're doing things as a result of the pandemic. Is there, I just wanted to make sure that the Secretary of State's office felt that they had the capacity to deal with this new election process. And especially since there's been some change of personnel over there as a result of some shifts and how we're doing things. And we really wanted to understand who the point of contact would be within the Secretary of State's office if there were an issue at the local level that we needed to have immediate, lines of communication open, and if they feel they have the capacity necessary to handle this.
To ask a question, Senator, who from the Secretary of State's office?
Good morning, Madam Chair. My name is Mark Voloshin. I'm the Deputy Secretary of State for Operations. For the record, Senator, I appreciate your question, and it's something certainly that has been weighing pretty heavily on our minds. Starting with the capacity question, though, certainly between the staff here at the state level, as well as the lion's share of work that has been done at the counties, the Secretary is confident we do have the capacity to address not only our routine statutory requirements leading into this election, but also addressing some of the changes that have resulted out of Assembly Bill 4. So from a pure capacity level, there are no concerns. Part of this request, though, clearly does identify a need for 2 additional temp services. The intent there is really to just address and get a couple additional personnel to help answer some of the questions. It's been an exponential growth of questions that have come from voters. Most of the time, just trying to understand, the changes from AB4, as well as understanding, all the different things maybe they're seeing in the media and how it applies to the state, or in many cases doesn't apply to the state. But from a capacity level, we are good. One thing also that this work program really doesn't hint at or even really indicate, but there's been a lot of internal decisions and discussions about how we can adjust our current personnel to match that requirement before coming to IFC. It does not, for example, highlight the fact that we've shifted 6 personnel to assist the elections division in many of their customer service calls. In regards to your question about a set point of contact, that is something that the Secretary is weighing pretty heavily right now. She has not yet made a decision as to who will replace Deputy Thorley, but it is something that, again, our routine discussions with the counties. There's plenty of redundancy. It is not just Deputy Thorley alone and unafraid who's answering the county's questions or is here to provide support to them. There's a number of us, myself included, and certainly many of the elections division staff that remain poised to support any of the county requirements moving forward. I'm certain that when the Secretary has made her decision, she will absolutely announce it and make sure that not only the counties are aware, but certainly this body is aware of who that individual will be that replaces Deputy Thorley. I hope that answers your questions.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I just wanted to make a comment that I appreciate everything that your staff and that staff and the Secretary of State are doing in this trying time, and the professionalism and efficiency that you're showing through this process.
Thank you.
So with that, are there any other questions from committee members at this time on item D1?
I have a couple of questions, Madam Chair.
Senator Kinsella.
So the first is looking at the language of the work program description. It indicates that there's a backlog, but does not describe what the backlog is of. Could you go in detail about what backlog it is that's leading to the need for these temporary workers?
Certainly. Again, Mark Voloshin, for the record, Deputy Secretary of State for Operations. You know, this request really is 3 separate requests with 3 different backlogs, and I think it's worth identifying that. Of the 5 positions that we've requested in this work program, 2 of these are in support of the Secretary of State's Elections Division, 2 positions are in support of the Securities Division, and 1 position is in support of the Nevada Lockbox and Domestic Partnerships Program. Each of those 3 different entities has its own backlog. In the case of the Elections Division, the number of phone calls, for example, and emails that we receive on a daily basis has skyrocketed from about 50 to approximately 1,000 to 1,500 a day, given a lot of the confusion surrounding the election. So that backlog by itself is one that warrants individual and separate attention from the other 2 requests. The Secretary of State's Securities Division, again, another backlog. This one, again, related, though, to the compliance audit investigators and the number of cases. As part of the requested budgetary reductions earlier in the year, there were a number of positions that were frozen unfilled. 3 of those in particular were associated with the Securities Division. As a result, there's a number of cases that just don't have the personnel to address them. So that's, again, a separate backlog. And then lastly, the Lockbox and Domestic Partnerships Program. Approximately 43,000 registrants are supported through that program. The one individual that was responsible for them left the agency in January. And as a result, that became a collateral duty for a number of other personnel in the agency. Again, requesting an individual to address those, the requirements of that program, and making sure that the requests are facilitated in a much more timely manner are all part of this work program. Does that answer your question?
It does. And I'm especially interested because the description in this work program speaks specifically to AB4. I'm interested in where you are directing voters to when they call with questions, and if you could give us guidance on the kinds of questions and whether you're seeing trends in what's leading to all of these calls, because it's my belief that we as leaders in our community can be helpful in addressing some of the issues that you're seeing.
Yes, ma'am. I tremendously appreciate that question. To start, whenever folks call asking about the election, some of the trends, again, not necessarily about AB4. There are some about AB4, what the implications are. Some questions are about, are there long-term permanent changes to the law? So we explain that. When it comes to resources, we certainly direct them to the Secretary's website to make sure that, again, they go to our source as a trusted source. where we have everything from the myth and facts PDF file. It's about 6 pages now, addressing many of the concerns and confusing language they might see in the national news media so that they understand what is, again, pure truth coming out of the Secretary of State's office. In regards to trends, though, again, really, there's just a lot of confusion, a lot of explaining. There's so much information being presented across the board from a variety of sources, whether it's social media or others, that really it's just explaining the law, explaining AB4, and in many cases, just explaining how things are the same in many cases that they had been in the past. Folks call asking, well, I want to be able to vote in person. Is that not, there's so much that was going on. Is that not possible? And we explain absolutely, and we direct them to their county clerks or the county registrar to make sure that they understand those locations. So again, nothing necessarily, outlandish or certainly, unique. It really ends up just being more clarification and reassurance that voters will have the ability to safely and securely cast their ballot this November, or really even starting here in a few days when those ballots go out to the different counties.
Or like those that have already gone out in two of our counties. And if I may have just one final question, Madam Chair. Yeah, thank you. I'm especially interested in making sure not only that these 2 temporary workers will help relieve the inundation of questions that your office is getting, but that they will also be properly trained to answer those questions. Are you confident that adding these 2 folks will make a significant difference? And if they do not, and if arguably it's predictable that calls will increase as people do start to get their ballots, and you all as a central repository of all things elections will likely grow your call load. What if these 2 people aren't enough? Do you have a contingency plan? And if not, how can we ensure that voters are getting access to correct and updated information?
Mark Voloshin for the record again. Again, another tremendous question. Thank you for that. These 2 personnel, again, as I indicated just a few minutes ago, are really a continuation of our efforts to reinforce the elections division. It started off, we looked internally and we found 2 individuals that we were able to balance their workloads and enable them to come over to the elections division. Didn't quite meet the mark. Even with training, there was still, again, an increase in calls and it wasn't meeting the requirement. So we added 2 additional personnel. Now we're up to 6. By doing that internally, it actually enabled the elections division to practice training individuals. We now have, for lack of a better term, cheat sheets on kind of the top 20 questions that will come into the agency. Outside of those 20 questions, the individuals understand who in the division they're able to reach out to get those specific questions answered. That might be, again, on the fringes of technical, understanding of some of the NRSs, or again, something that relates to Assembly Bill 4. In regards to if these 2 don't match the entire requirement, the analysis that went into this, and part of the reason why we requested these 2 is out of a belief that it will match our requirement and enable us to not only answer the questions, but also, again, we have our social media, again, through Twitter and Facebook. So we're continuing our outreach there as well to make sure that whether it's through phones, for some, again, voters that prefer to make phone calls, we have access to email, or for some of the younger voters that prefer social media, we've got basically all stops, a full 100% effort to make sure that we're conducting as much outreach as absolutely possible to get those questions answered in more of a proactive manner than necessarily sitting back and waiting for somebody to contact us. So again, if this doesn't end up meeting the requirement, we'll certainly conduct an analysis and look closely to see what other steps we may need to take. And certainly we will be in touch with this body if there's anything that the Secretary determines might be further warranted.
Thank you. And I would ask that you provide this committee, and at least I am very interested in having a copy of that cheat sheet so that we are all giving out correct and accurate information. So if you could provide that to this committee, it'd be very helpful.
Absolutely.
Yes, please. If you would just send it to staff, and then staff will make sure that all committee members have it.
Of course, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, committee members, are there any other questions on item D1? If not, then I would accept a motion to go ahead and process item number D1 from Senator Brooks. And do I have a second?
So I'll second.
Second from Dr. Titus. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, Mr. Compotic, could you call the roll, please?
Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson.
Yes.
Assemblyman Frierson.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Tolles.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Howdigy.
Yes.
Assemblyman Kramer.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Neal.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Spiegel. I'm sorry. Assemblywoman Monk.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Swank.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Backus.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Titus.
Yes.
Assemblyman Wheeler.
Yes.
Chair Carlton.
Yes, thank you very much.
Senator Brooks.
Yes.
Senator Kinsella.
Yes.
Senator Dennis.
Yes.
Senator Goycochea.
Yes.
Senator Kiefer.
Yes.
Senator Parks.
Yes.
Senator Settlemeyer.
Yes.
Vice Chair Woodhouse.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Compotic. Appreciate that. And committee members and public, I'll apologize if you hear any background noise on my end. I have a large delivery of food coming in today here at my office and a lot of volunteers. So if there's a lot of noise in the background, I apologize. I'll try to keep myself muted as much as possible. So with that, we'll go to item number D2. Governor's Office of Economic Development. I believe Ms. Benitez Thompson had some questions on D2. So if we could go ahead and bring up the appropriate person.
Madam Chair, this is Michael Brown at GOAD. Should I proceed?
Good morning. I think we'll just go to questions since it's written up for us rather than go too deeply into anything. So with that, Ms. Benitez Thompson, if you would like to go ahead and ask your questions, and then I'll open it up to other committee members.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. And good morning, Mr. Brown. I was wondering if we could start off with talking a little bit about how the the rental assistance program for our business community is going. I know with this recommendation, we're looking to use the same vendor as the vendor who's been processing those applications. And so it seems like we might have kind of a bellwether indication of how things are going so far and what demand looks like. And I think it kind of speaks to what demand might look like for this item. So could you talk a little bit about how that's going first off?
Certainly. Thank you, Michael Brown, for the record, Director of GOAD. Thank you, Leader, and Chair Carlton for today's hearing. This program was developed jointly with GOAD, the Office of the Treasurer, and the Department of Business and Industry. We were charged with it last June, and it was based on a model that moved around the nation, that was developed initially in Utah and shared with a network of economic development directors around the country. And the concept behind it was almost twofer. You were going to benefit the business that needed to pay its landlord, and you were going to stabilize a small business landlord in turn. And so we have rolled that out, and it closed on Monday. We have over 800 applications. And the treasurer estimates that that's a commitment of about $8.5 million, I believe, that would be expended through this. Utah had allocated, I believe, $40 million for their program, and they were coming in at about half at $20 million, which is how we came forward with the recommendation of $20 million, and we've committed about half of that. It is a complicated program, and so as we have moved program, the treasurer and the team of people in my office and his office have been trying to figure out how we simplify this next program. And in that program, it'll be direct assistance to the individual business. There won't be a third-party landlord where we need to certify that the funds are actually expended by the landlord as they committed to their tenant. And it will, and we also included the Department of Tourism as we built this program out, or the proposed program out, for your consideration today. And so that's how we're driving forward on this program. Eligibility will be broad as the legislature wished. And, we went back and changed some of the standards for the commercial program because some members of the legislature felt that perhaps it was some of the categories were too narrow. So we made those broad. And then finally, we have worked with business and industry to develop an outreach plan. I will personally be leading the rural part of that plan. And we're also going to propose to partner with chambers of commerce, because what we found with small businesses in the first program, leader, is that, if you're running a small business, you're spending your time running your small business. And so my staff and the treasurer's staff, we spend a lot of time coaching folks on how to fill out the forms, frankly. And so we want to partner with local chambers of commerce across the state to see if they can provide extra support with us in implementing that. And I can turn to the treasurer because, my office is more of a policy office. His office has got a lot of programmatic experience, and his staff has been dealing with a lot of the day-to-day implementation of the existing Craig program. So if you give me the deference, I'll pass to the treasurer to say a few words.
I think I'll ask real quick. I want to make sure I got a number that you stated right. So far in the commercial rental assistance program, 800 applications. So you see that paying out about 8.5 million, right? So we're going to have a balance left of unspent funds for the commercial assistance. Is that right?
Yes, and I'll ask the treasurer to confirm those numbers because he's actually been doing the tally on that.
Okay. And I can couch it into a bigger context for the treasurer as well, just kind of to get, I think it's more of a perspective than necessarily a direct question, but the idea being we're looking at we want to support business, we want to support small business, we want to make sure that we're putting resources out there to be used, but also looking at the demands and what programs seem to, where there seems to be the most demand. So I was trying to gauge on the commercial rental assistance program, what that demand was looking like versus the residential assistance program, with the thought being that before we put more money in either bucket, does it make sense to see if we have an under demand in one place, but an over demand like in the residential, then why we wouldn't consider first additional residential assistance versus more commerce assistance. So that's kind of the bigger question that I'm getting at.
Chair, with your deference, I'd love to throw in some additional data here. That's all right. It's Treasurer Conine. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for taking the time.
Yes, treasurer, you can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I saw a nod. The CRAG program, the Commercial Rental Assistance Grant Program, was additionally funded with $20 million. That included administrative costs, which we've been able to negotiate down to about 6% of the process. And that includes both the application review outside of the review that's being done by state employees, no additional costs there, and the process of actually sending checks out to vendors, which we determined was going to be bureaucratically a problem on the state side to get done as quickly as it needed to be. Happy to go into that, but that's where it is. The program originally received 1,465 pre-applications. That's that first two-page application process. As a reminder, the application was a twofold one where some initial information for eligibility was sent in first, and then the vendor would reach out to get more information. Of those 1,465, 130 were denied, and 1,335 were approved. The denials were primarily three reasons. One, lacking the necessary business licenses. They had a license perhaps in the county, but not in the state, or they didn't have a license in the state or the county. Not being in business long enough. There was a 6-month window that businesses needed to be open prior to March, and not meeting the minimum loss in revenue threshold, which was 30%. Most of them fell into the first two categories. After applicants submitted their pre-applications, they were able to move on to the full application. Of the 1,335, 831 fully submitted application materials. Now, those application materials included things like backup on revenue, so that we had the data to see whether or not they were eligible. They also included involvement from the landlord, because the payments were intended to be made directly to the landlord. So the landlord needed to stipulate they weren't going to evict for 90 days from the end of the process. They also needed to say that they would take the money. So only 831 of those 1,335 came through, and now we're reviewing all of their materials to make sure that those will be that they actually said the things that they said in the first group, right? To kind of going through that eligibility process. Anecdotally, the denials from this second review are things like employing more than 50 people, so larger businesses than we were intending to support, and not being able to substantiate the loss in revenue. So we have some businesses who said, yes, I lost more than 30%, but their financials don't show that. And so obviously they'd be kicked out of the program. From a broader sense, the thing that we've learned here, and I think the thing that we're seeing in economic assistance programs around the country, is that it makes sense to prioritize whom gets funds first, but not to have eligibility criteria that prevent people from applying. And the easier it is, the more businesses will do it. I know Director Brown worked with more than a dozen businesses, walking through the process. Our staff has dealt with thousands of emails on the topic. I've coached businesses through. We've called landlords. I mean, we went out and tried to give this money away, and it was more difficult than we thought it was. And I think that's because of the process. And so this NETS program, the PETS program, please.
I was going to say, so I think that's helpful. So help put that into context for me against the residential program or the residential rental program.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I could, right before that, to talk scope of full economic development proposals that have been in front of you, because I think that that speaks to where we are. Originally, the economic development proposals that you were looking at were about $70 million. There was the $20 million originally in the CRAG, and then in the IFC subcommittee on a previous Friday, times flat circle, I apologize, I think it was last week, but there was an additional $50 million in proposed projects. That included the projects that you see today and 37 or so million dollars worth of projects that you're not going to see. And so, to be very clear, $70 million of original economic development hold was intended, and we're only bringing forward about $32.5 million worth of projects, which leaves $37 million to support other priorities of the governor and the legislature. And certainly we'd be an advocate for some of that money or all of that money going to affordable housing. There are a lot of other things in that bucket, response and recovery and other programs. But from an economic development standpoint, given the money that's gone out on CRAG, assuming that with the PETS program, the new $20 million, we're able to get all the money out the door because of how easy we're trying to make it, and assuming that the two other minor programs, D3 and D4, are approved today, that would still leave $37.5 million currently unallocated that was originally going to go to economic development pieces. Now that 37.5 is because CRAG didn't get fully subscribed, right? The commercial rental program, but also because there were programs that didn't make it off the original plan because they weren't going to be able to be implemented in time, because we didn't have enough time to do the vetting before we brought them to you, because we frankly think that rental assistance and other programs need the money more than more speculative projects. So what we're bringing to you today from an economic development standpoint is, in our office's opinion and in GOED's opinion, the cream of the crop, the things we absolutely need to get done from a response and a recovery perspective and resiliency, excuse me. Hope that answers and scopes the problem a little bit, because in talking to a lot of you, I agree there are a lot of other needs of this money, and there are and it's finite, right? We have
So
infinite need.
with
And
8.5 million of the CRAG program being appropriated, but about 11.5 or 12 that from that program, is that 11.5 being shifted over in part of this 20 million?
So I'll answer that question from a money standpoint, which is capital is fungible. From a work program perspective, I'm not sure exactly how that works, and wouldn't want to speak to it. But functionally, it's all in the same CARES bucket. Director?
Well, I get that functionally it's all in the same CARES
Michael
bucket.
Brown,
Ginormous, right? So that's why I'm begging the question, like, from the Craig program, are you in your accounting processes, the unused balance from Craig, should I assume that this 20 million is 11.5 that didn't get spent, that was intended for economic development to help on the commerce side for small business, and since it didn't get used there, we're going to put it over here to help with this. It's part of the vision of this 20 million.
Yes, Michael Brown, Director, go ahead. The unspent funds from the Craig program, I don't have authority to make that switch. That would rest, I presume, with the governor's finance office or the legislature. And what I said at the start of this is that we would put a soft date of October 15th on Craig, and whatever wasn't committed or expended at that point would have to be made available for other state priorities. And on the PETS program, a soft date of October 30th. That's the second program up today, but I don't control that money, and neither does the treasurer.
Concur.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I have some additional questions that are kind of more logistical related, but my kind of overall perspective ones I think I've got answered. So I appreciate the members' indulgence. I'll yield.
Thank you. And if we need to come back on the logistics, we will if they don't get addressed. Okay, I believe I have Senator Parks wanted to ask a question on this one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't really have a question, but I do have, I guess, a little words of encouragement, and that is to Director Brown. I would like to make a pitch for GOED not to overlook or minimize the granting of awards to those nonprofit organizations that provide behavioral health care delivery services. I think we're seeing that as a result of the pandemic that we're having significant effects on our nonprofit organizations that provide such services. So as you proceed forward with whether it's 900 or 1,000 grants, that you will give equal consideration to those that provide nonprofit services in the behavioral health care. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Director Brown.
And thank you, Senator Parks.
Yes, Michael Brown. Director, go ahead. So noted. We will do that. This is less economic development. This is really economic relief that's being administered through GOED. GOED is functioning more as an orchestra conductor of this across multiple agencies and partners in state government at the request of the governor's office. I've made note of that, and we'll make some outreach into those areas.
Madam Chair, if I could add to that.
Yes, Treasurer.
Thank you. Thank you for the suggestion, Senator Parks. And just for the record, both in the CRAG program and in the proposed PETS program, behavioral health entities would be able to apply for that grant funding. We'd love to include them in outreach efforts. Additionally, and not on this item, but on D3, one of the proposed shovel-ready studies is to reinforce and evaluate better ways to support behavioral health around the state. Thank you.
I do have a question, and we've talked a lot about rent. But I'm not sure I specifically see that these dollars are just for rental assistance. Is this assistance for, especially when we get into the nonprofit world, there's a lot of different issues that go on. So is this specifically for helping them to pay the rent, or is this just basically funds that were lost due to COVID can be applied for to be able to help fill the gap that was created?
Treasurer Conine, for the record, the latter, ma'am. So the goal for these funds is for them to be fully flexible. So if a business needs help paying rent, they can use it. If they need help to retain employees, they can use it. If they need help to retrofit their store or buy PPE, they could use them for that. If they need them to buy additional supplies because the need on their business, especially from a nonprofit standpoint, has exceeded their supplies currently, they can use them for that. The goal of the program is to be very, very, very flexible for businesses of all types.
Okay, thank you. Just want to make sure that's clear so that a lot of folks have already dealt with the rental issue, but there may be other gaps that they need to fill between now and the beginning of the next fiscal year. So, okay, thank you. Other questions? I believe Senator Woodhouse had a comment.
Yes, Madam Chair. I wanted to make a similar comment to Senator Parks's comment. We all know that our small businesses are struggling, are heavily impacted by what has happened with the pandemic. But I also want to make a plea to Director Brown and to the Treasurer that you do all you can through this funding to assist our arts and culture nonprofits. They are struggling exceedingly, and when that happens, just like everything else, it directly impacts the citizens of our state. So anything you can do as you're looking at your priorities to certainly consider them as well. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
Michael Brown, Director GOAD, for the record.
Yes, Mr. Brown.
Yes, we reached out to the Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs at the start of the planning process in July for their input on it. It is certainly an important priority, whether it be cowboy poetry in Elko or the symphony in Las Vegas or cultural programs in Reno. This is a state that has a robust arts and culture that has definitely suffered from this, and it is a priority that would be within this program. I kind of envision this as Part A was for the commercial landlord assistance, the Craig program. Part B is this more direct assistance to businesses and nonprofits.
I believe I heard Assemblywoman Neal with a question.
Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Sorry.
That's okay. It's hard. This is hard to manage sometimes. That's okay.
Okay, I just had two quick questions. The first one is on the priority list of applications of applicants. So I have, you guys have at number 5, businesses closed due to executive order. But then in the qualifications, you guys have be in good standing with no liens or judgments. And so I wonder, what kind of data do you have around those businesses that had to close for 6 months, and whether or not they're being impaired by a potential lien or judgment that they may have received on their property, and how are you working with them? And then the second question is, in the qualifications, you have that, nonprofits, chambers of commerce, and arts are not under the gross revenue, which I get, or the employee, but so what is their criteria?
Director, if you'd like, I could take the first one if you want to take the second one. Okay, I'm seeing a nod. Treasurer Conine, for the record, the lien, just make sure I get the language correctly. The lien language is specifically around state liens. So someone who perhaps didn't pay their property tax or didn't pay their something else. The CRF grants, coronavirus relief fund dollars, very specifically can't be used for revenue replacement which means that we can't pay someone's property tax because we'd run afoul of the Treasury guides. So when someone has been behind on, and we had a couple of these for the commercial rental assistance grant program, when someone's been back on say property tax or back on a business license, we've worked with them to get that current, so then we could release the funds to them. We haven't, we're working with businesses to try and get them through the process. This doesn't involve liens that could be on the business for some other reason, like a landlord put a lien on property because rent hasn't paid or something like that. So we've been working with businesses on that front to make sure that they can get through that process. And it's often relatively hands-on, one-on-one piece of business, either with ourselves or the vendor.
Thanks.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes, Michael Brown, Director of GOAD.
Go ahead, Mr. Brown.
Yes, Michael. Yes, Senator Neal. The partnerships with the chambers are really to help us reach out particularly to micro businesses and to small businesses to get the chambers help in helping those firms, which are often only 1, 2, 3 people, actually complete the application and get it to us so that we can get them the assistance that they deserve. And so we'll be canvassing the chambers, and whether it be the Latin Chamber or the Elko Chamber, and saying, would you become our partner? Because we simply don't have the staff available, even in our 2 offices, to coach hundreds of businesses through this kind of application. Arts and culture, we received input from the Department of Arts and Culture, as to how to structure those awards. Obviously several of them have had substantial revenue declines, and so they've got a little separate criteria because they're not the same as let's say a coffee shop or a restaurant. And so we've got the expertise from the Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs that'll help us in that area.
Thank you.
Okay, with that,
Thank
I have a couple people in the queue. If I can, I'm going to go ahead and move forward. I have Ms. Swank listed next, and then after that, I'll go to Assemblywoman Tolles. Was there someone else wishing to be recognized at this time?
Madam Chair, Senator Goycochea Windhebber.
Okay, Senator Goycochea, I'll put you on the list. So we'll go to Assemblywoman Swank next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just a quick question. I know for other programs like the PPE and other CARES Act programs, when you've been able to, when an entity has been able to apply for rental assistance or payroll assistance, there's been a time frame that would cover. And I may have just missed it in reading this, but I'm wondering, so if a business entity is applying for assistance with payroll, what period of time would that cover?
Treasurer Conine, for the record, we've structured that or proposed to structure that based on the widest amount allowable under the coronavirus relief guidance. So from the beginning of March to now.
Treasurer, so it would be through the end of the year, correct?
It would be. That's yes. Correct.
Till December the 30th when the money needs to be spent?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
And so with that, I will go to Assemblywoman Tolles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thanks for all these proposals today. As I look through the documents under the section on priority of funding and disadvantaged business enterprises, arts, culture, chambers, other businesses, other nonprofits. I wonder if specifically there was discussion about adding businesses at the top of the priority list that were either fully closed or limited to 50% capacity. So as I've surveyed other states that have used this CARES Act funding for business relief programs, I noted that a good portion of those states had specific programs, for example, for restaurants and bars. And so I just wondered if that had been part of the discussion and where that would fall on the priority of funding, because I would certainly think that full closure or 50% capacity would put them at the top of the priority list.
Director Brown, I'm happy to take this one. I know you could too. Treasurer Conine, for the record, completely agree. And one of the governor's priorities in helping to design this program was to make sure that businesses that were closed, like bars, for instance, due to the pandemic and executive order, would be prioritized at the top of the list. We looked at doing a separate program for bars and restaurants, but I think the thing that we've all learned through this pandemic is that it all takes longer than it's expected to, both to put together, to get out on the street, to get people to apply for, and then to get the funds out the door. And so we wanted to use that as a prioritization within pets, but not have a standalone program, again, just to try and get those funds out as effectively as possible.
Thank you. So would it be accurate to say that that would, as we look at the list of priority of funding, that would be at the top of the priorities, those who'd been directly closed?
Treasurer Conine, for the record, we expect that every one of those priority groups would be at the top of the list versus, say, a business that doesn't fall within that list. Think about that list as binary. You're on it or you're not. But certainly the intention is to focus on businesses like that.
Okay, thank you. And then the other thing that I noticed is, as I look at other states and how they'd set up similar programs, a lot of states required some sort of reporting back. So, typically within a 6-month period of time, if they received these funds, they had to report back how they used it so that we could keep track of that and see, what percentage was used on, for example, payroll, utilities, inventory, what have you, out of the list, and if that was used as intended as just an accountability measure.
Treasurer Conine, for the record, currently the plan is to have businesses fill out a report on their plans for the money and then to spot audit from there. But we can certainly have a requirement that gives a narrative of how they spent that money, kind of a one-page. We're trying to keep the administrative costs down, especially post December 30th, when it won't be federal dollars paying for them. But happy to do that. I think it's a great idea and will give us some good data.
Thank you. I'd like to see that. I'd like to make sure that we do have some follow-up and accountability there that comes back to us and to your office and to the governor's office.
Okay. Thank you, Assemblywoman Toles. I will go to Senator Gokachia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a couple of questions. Just first and foremost, though, and one of them was answered in your response to Ms. Swank. We can go clear back to March 1st. Now, the total amount of this grant would be $10,000, say, to a small business. Will they be able to make this application online?
Treasurer Conine, for the record, absolutely.
And you presently got a website up or somewhere they can apply. I'm concerned. I represent a lot of the rurals. Some of them have chambers. Some of them, depending on how effective their particular chamber is, a lot of them might not belong. $10,000, which I understand is a grant award. When we look at what has occurred since March 1st, just logistics, product shortages, I don't think it's going to be very difficult for a lot of businesses to show a $10,000 loss.
Michael Brown, Director of GOAD. Thank you, Senator. Yes, I agree. We learned a lot in the Craig program, and we really have to go out and make the marketing pitch to small businesses, and we've worked up a plan with business and industry to do that, and there will be a special focus on our more remote rural small businesses.
Thank you, Director Brown. And again, where do I tell my people to go to the website to access this program?
Michael Brown, for the record, Senator, it will be on the GOAD website, and I believe there's an upload Treasury's website. And I think what we will also do is we will send all the legislators something simple that they can also share with their constituents and have availability if you will get direct inquiries.
Well, thank you. And again, where they can go clear back, and a lot of things qualify. I think you're going to get a lot of applications, although it isn't a lot of money, $10,000. that might be the difference in make or break in some of these small mom and pop businesses. Thank you.
And thank you, Senator. And I see in my notes that the processing and the timeline, I believe there's an outreach program that intends to have applications go live within the next 3 weeks of this being approved. Is that correct, Mr. Conine?
Treasurer Conine, for the record, yes, ma'am, it is.
Thank you. And
Yes.
just on the other side, as we
And,
talked about nonprofits and essential services, I know there were businesses that were asked to close, but there were also those of us that were asked to stay open and did stay open, but resources still disappeared because of just the nature of how the pandemic hit us. So there were entities that were asked to stay open and still losing contributions at the same time because of the way that they were funded. And just to put it on the record, as being involved in these types of things, I have participated in this discussion and will be voting on this item. But as executive director of the nonprofit that I'm at, we have no intention of applying for these funds. So I feel comfortable in being able to participate in this particular discussion. Are there other questions or comments from other committee members?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I had one last one, and it's more just to make sure that we have the statement on the record for the remaining 30 million that's outside of the 20 million that the office intends to spend. And I think it's comprised of the 8.9 million for NSHE, 4.5 in resiliency projects with GoEd and Dieter, 10 million to be held in reserves, and then 6.5 is unplanned. But I think we needed to hear from Mr. Brown a little bit more about the plan for those dollars.
So in excuse me. Yes, Michael Brown, Director of Business and Industry. No, I'm Director of GoEd now. The governor's office asked in July for a plan on economic relief, resiliency, and that I was to poll all the departments in the state to see, what contribution they might want to make in this. So we reached out to tourism, we reached out to Dieter, we reached out to OSIT, we reached out to INSHE, and we reached out to Treasurer and Business and Industry. Again, functioning as the orchestra leader. We're not playing every one of these instruments here at GoEd. When we did that using the 50 million number, we put 10 million aside in case any of these programs were oversubscribed. So if the upcoming PETS program were to be oversubscribed, we would come back to you with a request to possibly draw on another 10 million that was penciled into onto the spreadsheet. And then had Craig been oversubscribed, the same, we might have wanted to draw on that. Craig is undersubscribed, and so there will be available funds going back to the Government Finance Office for consideration for other uses. INSHE had projects that they took forward, that they brought forward as suggested, and those are working their way through the Governor's Finance Office to INSHE at this point. And then we had the proposal that the Treasurer will be discussing at length here, which is on the agenda today, that was originally slated, I think, at $2.5 million, but I think he's now brought it in for about $1 million less than that. And then finally, I canvassed my staff and the Dieter staff on what we could do in the area of resiliency. How can we strengthen workforce programs? How can we strengthen our labor market, our workers? And so those are the other two proposals that are on here today. And like I say, I was not any unspent funds, like I say, go back to go unallocated funds, go back for the GFO and for, I assume, this committee to make decisions on what happens to those going forward. Thank you.
Are there any other questions from any other committee members at this time? Seeing none, Mr. Brown and Mr. Conine, I appreciate the information and the depth of the information. Even though we did receive this item just a little late, later than we would have wished, but we do understand the importance of this, and it seems as though it's very thoroughly explained, and we have a lot of information on it. So if there are no other questions from committee members at this time.
Madam Chair, I think I saw that Ms. Swank did have one.
Thank you. Ms. Swank, did you have another question, or we get your issues answered?
Got my issues answered, but thank you.
You're welcome. Good. Thank you, Madam Majority Leader. Sometimes I can miss folks with their hands raised on this. So with that, seeing no other questions or concerns, we'd be happy to go ahead and process item number D2. I would accept a motion from Majority Leader, Ms. Benitez Thompson, and a second from Senator Woodhouse. Are there any other questions or comments on this particular item? Seeing none, I would ask Mr. Kompotek to call the roll.
Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson.
Yes.
Assemblyman Frierson.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Tolles.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Haudegi.
Yes.
Assemblyman Kramer.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Neal.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Monk.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Swank.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Backus.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Titus.
Yes.
Assemblyman Wheeler.
Yes.
Chairwoman Carlton.
Yes.
Senator Brooks.
Yes.
Senator Kinsella.
Yes.
Senator Ennis.
Yes.
Senator Goicoechea.
Yes.
Senator Kiefer.
Yes.
Senator Parks.
Yes.
Senator Settlemeyer.
Yes.
Vice Chair Woodhouse.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Kompotek. We'll go ahead and move on to item number D3. I believe this is Mr. Conine will be the presenter on D3.
Yes, ma'am. Would you like me to give a brief overview?
Yes, very, very briefly, please, especially since we did receive this quite late, and it seems as though there's a lot of missing information on this one, and especially with the concerns the legislature has had about studies recently. We really want to make sure we're understanding what the proposal is. I know we did not receive this one until late Monday, so staff barely had a day to actually work on this proposal. So if you would give us an overview, we'll move forward from there.
Absolutely. Treasurer Conine, for the record. First off, apologies for the timing, as I'm sure everyone is working as hard as they possibly can to get these things over the line. Relatively complicated one to get sorted. And we also wanted to make sure we brought you the number that was accurate. So originally we thought it was going to be about 2.5 million, but our team has been able to negotiate these contracts down to a little bit more than $1 million, which represents, just to put it in scope, a little bit more than 84 basis points or 8.4 basis points, 0.08% of the total coronavirus relief spent. To date, you've seen a lot of proposals that fall into two of the three buckets contemplated by the Treasury and the Congress when they enacted the Coronavirus Relief Fund. Those three buckets are response, so the immediate health response, masks, PPE, making sure that we've got contact tracing and the rest. A good chunk of the funds have gone there. Bucket number two is recovery, and the project that you just approved, thank you for that, speaks to recovery. Bucket number 3 is resiliency. And as we looked at programs that other states around the country are doing and programs that were intended by the language, one of the pieces that we hadn't brought forward and we're bringing forward with item number D3 is a resiliency plan. Now, I'm very familiar, Chair Carlton, to your and other concerns as it relates to studies. I think too often studies get done in the state. They're put on the shelf next to the study that preceded it, and it goes from there. Now, these studies are different, and the reason they're different is for a couple of reasons. One, we have a crack team that is very dedicated to making sure they've gotten done. I don't believe I've ever been in front of you asking for a study before, and I don't expect to ever do it again unless I'm sure that we're going to be able to do something with it. 2, the Coronavirus Relief Fund guidance in and of itself requires that these be quickly and immediately both conducted and actionable to meet guidance. And in our conversations with Treasury, with the National Governors Association, the National Association of State Treasurers, National Association of State Budget Officers, dozens of treasurers, dozens of conversations with Treasury, we feel that these are not just eligible, but necessary. And here's why. As we come out of this pandemic, we need to develop a targeted and comprehensive plan which can be acted on immediately for the state so that we can get folks back to work and we can begin diversifying our economy. I don't think this will come as a surprise to everyone else, but our road to economic recovery cannot be simply turning around and walking back the way that we came. Some of the jobs that were lost during this pandemic will not come back. And so we're going to need to find ways to not just fix the problems caused by the pandemic, but to understand them and to help retrain folk. There are 6 studies as part of this, and they're gelled together by a study that strengthens state systems and processes. And the goal of that study is to put together a plan for the state infrastructure bank and other ways that we can attract funding from outside the state that do not require taxpayer dollars that will create jobs. And that's why I was so happy that William Stanley was able to testify earlier on, because he understands the importance of infrastructure jobs as it comes out of this. One of the studies is about broadband technology. One of the studies is about enhancing Nevada's supply chain and last mile delivery to avoid not just the temporary toilet paper problems, but to make sure that our products can get in and out from a construction perspective, from a food perspective, and to make sure that we aren't subject to effectively being gorged on wages and other costs at the end. To assess behavioral health capacity, a lot of members on this committee and other members of the legislature, we've talked about behavioral health. How can we fix it? And how can we look at what the pandemic has done to behavioral health and actually find ways to solve the problem going forward? How can we retrain workers who are displaced? I touched about this a little bit earlier on, but some of those jobs aren't going to come back. And so it's our responsibility, we believe, from an economic resiliency standpoint, to come up with ways to make sure that those workers can be retrained, to find the types of jobs that they can go to, and to make sure that we've got a plan for them. And then finally, a study that will bring all of those pieces together into a comprehensive plan that it can exist and be implemented next to the Governor's Office of Economic Development, or at this point, recovery plan that's being conducted by SRI to look towards what the next pillars are. To deal with a couple of questions that I've got. One, I know that there is a frustration to some on this committee about the use of incentives as a tool to attract businesses to the state. Incentives are one of the few tools that we have to attract businesses to the state. This item, D3, helps us create other tools that can attract businesses to the state, using money that isn't tax dollars, using money that wouldn't go to schools or something else. There's also been a concern about using funds for a study for future planning when we have an immediate need. And I think you're right, we do have an immediate need. We have an almost infinite immediate need. If I can take a moment, just a personal privilege to get off topic for a brief second. It's about bonds, but I'll come right back. I think it's important for this committee to know that yesterday, Moody's affirmed our high credit rating, and they affirmed it specifically because of the difficult decisions that this legislature made and this governor made to cut the budget when we knew revenues weren't coming in. A lot of other states kicked the can. They said, we're going to wait for federal support. We're going to wait for someone to come in and save our butts. But we didn't. You made the hard decisions. Moody's and the market reflects that, which is why we're going to be able to borrow money in this general obligation note coming up at the cheapest rate possible. Why is that important? Because they see the work that's been done and they see the dedication to actually making sure that the hard decisions are made. This, I don't think, is one of those hard decisions. This is a spend of a little bit more than $1 million on surveys that I individually promise each and every one of you will be used, because that's my job. And I'm not going to come ask for money that could go to housing or could go to something else if I didn't think it was going to be necessary and useful down the road. Additionally, just from a scope perspective, We talked about how originally there were $70 million worth of capital projects, government economic development projects that were on the table. That number is now down to 32.5, which opens up $37.5 million for all sorts of other important and necessary government functions. But this is the only thing that you're going to see come forward from our office or from the Governor's Office of Economic Development that deals with economic resiliency, what we do next. And I think it's deeply, deeply important. Happy to answer any questions. Really appreciate the time and the discretion, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Conine. So I'm concerned about spending this money on a study. I'm not sure the guidance actually allows that. It was my impression that this was good to go to other things. So do you have anything that says that these funds can be used for a study?
Yes, ma'am. So in conversation with GOED and again, our federal partners, the NGA, the NAST, which is the National Association of State Treasurers, a lively group, the National Association of State Budget Officers, also a lively group. We are sure that it is not only allowable for use under CARES, but is one of the most effective uses. A couple of pieces of relevant coronavirus relief fund guidance. Of course, that guidance has changed, I believe, 9 times. Most recent was published on September 2nd. These things are allowable. Expenses associated with conducting recovery planning projects. Expenses for technical assistance to local authorities or other entities on mitigation of COVID-19 related threats to public health and safety. Expenses associated with upgrading critical public health infrastructure to increase the public health response to COVID-19. Expenses for establishing and operating public telemedicine capabilities for COVID-19 related treatment. Expenses to facilitate distance learning, including technological improvements in connection with school closings to enable compliance with COVID-19 precautions, or if you will, the broadband study. And expenses to improve telework capabilities, for public employees to ensure compliance with the COVID-19 public health precautions. The Coronavirus Relief Fund guidance issued from the Department of Treasury states that
Mr. Conine, I'm going to stop you there because this is this is the type of thing that should have been in the document for us. So you were saying expenses related to, but you weren't saying study. So you're associating the study with the expenses related to.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct. I apologize. I thought that information was transmitted to LCB. I'm looking at my staff, but yes, that is the nexus and is a nexus being used by other states for this type of work.
And if I'd have known that, I probably wouldn't have asked the question. So just curious as to why. So this morning I was reading through some news and different things and noticed that Congresswoman Titus had a blurb out there that the state is receiving $13.8 million over 3 years to the Nevada Governor's Workforce Innovation to do, I believe, some of the things that you're talking about doing here. And also another concern is this really does fall within Owen and WIOA and the Wagner-Peiser Act and the SEP funds. So why are we not using any of those funds to do this work? Why are we using CARES funds?
Treasurer Conine, for the record. So Owen and the other groups who are involved in that process will be and have been involved in the development of this. The goal of this is to create not redundant work, but work that can sit next to and on top of additional work that's going. For instance, the broadband piece, as an example, is in partnership with OSIT, who's been working on this for a long time and needs a little bit more information to get over the hump on their pandemic recovery plan. So all of those groups, the goal is to be complementary and not redundant.
All righty. So with that, I believe some other folks had some questions. I will go to Assemblywoman Neal first.
Thank you, Chair. So I have just one question. I understood what was going. I mean, I'm thank Chair Carlton for number one asking about the studies, but I guess the thing that popped up in my mind was, how are we dealing with or trying to prioritize understanding what actually happened with the business sectors and how and which ones expired and how they're struggling and their needs around COVID versus all all of this other stuff. Like, I get the need for broadband and all the other things, but I feel like businesses, there's a lot of things that happen within that 6 months and businesses that are not coming back. And it kind of, this question ties into so many other things in terms of an economic recovery, because if we don't have the data that helps us understand which business sectors were completely lost and the ones that are struggling and how we support them, how do we really sufficiently move forward as a state and as an economy for our state? And I guess that's what I'm trying to understand.
Assemblywoman Neal, Treasurer Conine for the record. Oh, go ahead, Director Brown. Did you want to start there?
Yes. Michael Brown, Director of GOAD. Almost the second week of the pandemic, Bob Potts here at GOAD organized a weekly call of all the state's economists, all the advisors that are connected to GOAD. And we have had that every Thursday and have an extensive body of knowledge as to what's happened in the Nevada economy. There is a tendency in public life to always want to put a scenario around difficult situations, and we have not done that. We are looking at an L-shaped recovery of the potential alphabet series of recoveries. We have been advised by Stanford Research Institute that the first priority has to be restoration of public health systems and dealing and confidence needed for business travelers, convention travelers to return to Las Vegas. So we have prioritized first and foremost, based on that data, the public health response, and only after July started to focus on relief, now focused here at the end of the year on some potential longer term resilience matters. But we would be glad to arrange a briefing for you, Assemblywoman, on this. We have extensive data on it, and we're monitoring it literally every Thursday with the best minds in the state. And like I say, I can arrange for Bob to provide you a briefing.
Yeah, thank you for that, because if there's an actual compiled report, I'd love to read it.
Yeah, Michael Brown for the record. We provided at the GOAD board meeting last week a summary for the GOAD board, and I will have that transmitted to Legislative Council Bureau to be shared with the members, and then we would be available to answer any questions on that. I want to commend Bob for doing this, because he started it by using the Small Business Administration's responses they received for the initial round of disaster relief loans, and he really built this model out and then brought all the state economists and experts into the room for these weekly briefings. So we have a very good feel for all this, and we'll get that around to everyone. Thank you.
I believe I have Assemblywoman Titus next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question goes back to the process in the documents that were submitted to us. It was mentioned that you're seeking out 5 economic analysis. Are those going to be, and you're going to contract that out, are they 5 separate groups that you're using, and then you're going to compile that all into one item and you have a set date for that? So can you fill me in on perhaps the process, and then I have a follow-up question.
Treasurer Conine for the record. Thank you for the question. Yes, there are 5 separate industry-leading experts, 3, I believe, based in Nevada. One is the premier infrastructure group in the United States, and the other is the premier behavioral health group in the United States, neither of which are based in Nevada. The others are. And the process is, upon approval, we will move to Board of Examiners. We have contracts in place in front of them for their review and approval, and then immediately get to work putting draft reports together, which would be due approximately a month from today, around the beginning of November. Then those reports get consolidated and made final, and then used all before December 30th, which is.
And so that's the goal, is to, the goal then is to have these at a set date. You mentioned, yes, by December 30th, but that information is going to be received before then, and we'll get that final report by December 30th?
Yes, ma'am. We expect to have the final report on November 30th.
Okay. And then my next actual question is, looking at the 5 different sets of information that you're gathering, having been involved with this for quite a long time, we hear study after study. In each of these departments is something like broadband. It's been an issue for our state for a long time. We've done, in my mind, infinite studies on this problem and behavioral health. I mean, those of us involved in the 4 quadrants of the state and being on these behavioral health committees, and we do analysis after analysis where we're lacking. I'm just concerned that it seems like this is some duplication, and perhaps the reach should have been maybe to department heads of some of the departments saying, hey, what's your need? Because they've been looking at this for a long time. And I'm just wondering if that's what your consultants are going to do, just basically go to the departments that have already been doing this. And is this how we're spending this money? I just want to make sure that we're going to be gaining something that we don't already have. And if it's just something like compiling this, then I think perhaps it could be done differently. So could you explain that to me?
Absolutely. Treasurer Conan, for the record, first off, and I think that's an exceptionally good question and a clarification I appreciate the opportunity to make. This is not a make work consolidation process. This is taking the work that the department heads have been working on, the groups like OSIT have been working on, and providing the additional connection to the pandemic and figuring out how the pandemic has impacted that work and the additional needs for things like broadband that have been made clear and visible to all of us as far as a utility that needs to be fixed. But also to look for ways, and this is where the treasurer's office comes in, to look for ways to pay for it that aren't additional taxes or additional bonding that has to be supported by property taxes or something else. And that's where the infrastructure bank piece comes in, right? So all of this ties together to provide not just an answer to the what should we do, but finally an answer to the how can we do it? And that's why I feel comfortable bringing the studies forward, because I know if we can answer the how can we do it question, these things can actually get done. I hope that answers the question.
It helps, and thank you for that, and thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for the question, Madam Chair.
You're welcome, Assemblywoman. So with that, I believe I have Ms. Benitez Thompson is next in the queue.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And some of this is going to be echoing what Assemblywoman Titus just mentioned. It just seems to me that so many of these needs that we're talking about, I feel like we have empirical evidence, if not studies already existing about what the needs are. And it's always just been a lack of funding to actually accomplish them. With broadband, we know we need more infrastructure, and it's just a matter of build out. Specifically with behavioral health, we know what the issues are. They've been well documented, well discussed, lengthy conversations on the public testimony regarding this. But we also know that there have been requests from federally qualified healthcare centers to say, we plan to build out and we can meet this public healthcare crisis need if we can get this small investment to help us expand our footprint so we can take in more patients and provide specifically more behavioral health. So I'm especially opposed to the idea of a $100,000 study. There are requests sitting there for dollars that can be put to work so that we can immediately start expanding capacity in behavioral health. And I know of one project, but I'm sure that there's many others statewide, and building out those federally qualified healthcare centers would be so important. I don't think we need, I think $100,000 to study that need is probably the least best use of those dollars. And then just echoing around the studies on displaced workforce. We have so many departments that do that work and who have been keeping track of data for years. I know Chairwoman Carlton was talking about them. Sitting that on the subcommittee of Health and Human Services, when we review those programs, especially the programs within DETR and regarding workforce, we have so many entities out there. And once again, we've talked about this so much that I don't think we need a study on it. I think it's about actually identifying project and getting dollars to work. And so I guess that's my biggest thing, is that we've we've been presented with the legislature with dozens of projects that we weren't able to afford in a lot of these arenas. And I imagine that there has to be, I would say shovel ready, although they're not all shovel, but as a use of analogy, there are plans out there that I think could probably hit the ground running that just need dollars behind them. And we finally have the dollars. So I'd rather see implementation of programs rather than studies of needs. I think we know the needs.
Treasurer Conant, may I respond, Chair? Just have a couple of points on
Yes,
that.
please, briefly. Thank you.
Sure, I'll do my best. On the federally qualified health centers, we completely agree. Our office worked with Senator Cortez Masto's office to make sure that we had the Treasury guidance and ability to use money for those things. That doesn't fall within economic development, doesn't fall within Director Brown or my scope, but deeply support it, think it would be an eligible use. What this does is it helps us identify how to pay for things like that. And I can't speak to, it's not in our office's control on spend of CRF and prioritization of it, but we were asked to put together economic development work, and this is economic development work that will help fix that long-term behavioral health problem by finding money that is not tax money. Because I think you hit it right on the head. We know, right, that there is needs from an FQHC and for other functions on behavioral health. We know that there's needs on broadband, but OSIT tells us that they need additional studies and they need to know how to pay for it. And what this does is it helps create that long-term resiliency, which lets us pay for it. This isn't another study for the sake of a study. I don't have time, and I expect none of you have time, nor would I bring you that. What this is a study about how to pay for it and how to make sure that we are dealing with the ramifications of the pandemic and creating long-term resiliency for it. I completely agree. I think a great use of the funds that are left, and I would certainly be up there testifying for it, in the $37 million of economic development money we're not spending would be to support some of those FQHCs. We've got a plan and a proposal ready to go on that, and I'd happy to send it to you or any of the members afterwards. I think it's a great idea.
Madam Chair, I think I'm a little bit confused by what I heard, because is there, I think one of the questions that we have and that staff has asked is how these dollars are falling into the treasurer and GOED's purview, and perhaps why it isn't best to be under the purview of Health and Human Services. I feel, and I think maybe that's the sentiment that we're feeling, is that disconnect in the agencies that do the work. So is there something prescriptive in the CARES Act that's preventing these specific projects from falling under the purview of Health and Human Services or DEED or WIOA, or those kind of existing programs?
Treasurer Conant, for the record, no. But when those agencies have been focused on the response, and we were tasked with focusing on the recovery and the resiliency. And so we're thinking about what the steps are beyond this and how we're going to pay for them, create the jobs associated with expanding FQHCs, create the jobs associated with expanding broadband, the jobs associated with supply chain and the rest. That's been our focus. But we're, of course, working with those departments to make sure that the needs they have and the studies they already have done aren't repeated, right? That we're not wasting money or funds. Frankly, that's how we were able to get the initial projections of 2.5 million down to this 1.05 million, by working with those agencies to not be redundant and to make sure that we were doing the work necessary for us. I think to some extent, yes, these are not functions of the Treasurer's office, and I deeply look forward to getting back to a post-pandemic time when we can talk about bonds and college savings. But in the midst of a pandemic, I think everybody picked up an oar, and the governor asked us to pick up this one.
Michael Brown, Director of COED. Part of this also comes out of the advice that we had received from SRI, that we should look for our opportunities to strengthen the core infrastructure of the state, and to work cross-agency in this area, and the Treasurer brought this idea forward. We vetted it with our advisors at Stanford Research Institute, and they thought it was something that we should pursue. They said the same to the GOED board last week. We took the matter to the guys, and that's how the package ended up in front of you today. This is about long-term resiliency.
So I guess one of my cleanup questions will be to the treasurer. Of course, we want to do everything that we can to help create jobs, but in my years in the legislature, I haven't seen too many studies actually create jobs except for the people who do the studies. So we've not talked anything about implementation, and we've not talked about anything about the possible request from any of these agencies or GOED to be able to incentivize more businesses to come after we do these studies. So how do these studies create jobs?
Treasurer Conan, for the record, I'll let Director Brown talk from an incentive perspective. But in order to create infrastructure construction jobs, we have to pay for them. And of course, and that's always been an issue. We know even though our bond rating remains high and we're able to borrow money, the simple tax base size of the state prevents us from doing all the infrastructure work we'd like to do. Infrastructure jobs, and I think that's why Mr. Stanley testified earlier, infrastructure jobs in Nevada are good, high-paying union jobs and the type of work that we try and support. This work will give us the tools that we need and the plan that we need to go raise money from outside the state for the state infrastructure bank to finance projects without requiring tax incentives. That's the purpose of this, and why this is different than other studies and other groups of studies is because we're not trying to figure out just the problem. I think the majority leader's point, we know what the problem is. We need to have more behavioral health centers, and we need to fund FQHCs and expand the existing ones and put ones in communities where they don't currently exist. We don't have enough. We need to go find additional ways to get federal dollars into projects like this. This is the vehicle, and it supports something that the legislature created in 2017 in Assembly Bill 399, that state infrastructure bank. This gets that off the ground. And then we're able to use that money to create jobs, thousands of construction jobs, thousands in broadband installation, in utility expansion, in green energy, but we don't have anything to pay for them right now. And the tax base, is not in my court. It's in your court, and I don't envy you that. But this is something we can do to help, and a small amount of money that can create a long-term economic resiliency in Nevada, which is why we're supporting it. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. It sort of does, but it really doesn't answer the question on how this creates jobs. But I understand the process that you think it will do. I'm concerned about doing studies and there being no implementation plan. And since we did get this document so late and staff really didn't have a chance to follow up with you, there's still a lot of unanswered questions. So with that, I'd open it up to other members at this time if they have any follow-up questions.
I do, Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes, Speaker, yes. Good morning.
Thank you. Mr. Treasurer, I need shorter, more concise answers on the job issue. And so number one, well, can you in a clearer way indicate whether or not this is going to create jobs? And B, and you said thousands and thousands of construction jobs. What timeline are we looking at? If I'm going to support this and say that part of my reasoning is because this is going to create jobs and clean energy jobs, whatever, it's going to create jobs. When am I going to be able to answer the question as to whether or not that actually happens? So can you give me a clear indication of exactly how this is going to create jobs and when? By when are we going to really get a return on this decision to know if it came to fruition?
Treasurer Conan, for the record, and Speaker, I will certainly try to use fewer words and be more concise. The question on timing is one that is a little bit market dependent, but let's talk in broad scopes. We expect that if we're able to get this work done, that will quickly lead to the implementation of an infrastructure bank, which will allow, with shovel-ready projects, for us to start getting jobs towards the end of next year, so the end of calendar 21, the beginning of calendar 22. That's our timeline. That's what success looks like to our office. When it speaks to how it will create jobs, And I'll go back to the last recession in ARA just real briefly. The state lost out on a number of projects because we weren't shovel ready, because we didn't have a consolidated approach to where those funds should go. And so different municipalities and counties applied for potential projects, and they all got together and did their own individual projects, and those projects competed against each other for federal and other dollars. The goal of this, in some ways, is to bring all of that together and make sure that the efforts that are made are consolidated and structured with input from the municipalities and the counties, but to try and better achieve the federal funding that is out there and will be out there, as well as a significant, when I say significant, I mean about $2.8 trillion worth of private capital currently on the sideline, looking for things like infrastructure projects to invest in. I hope that answers the question.
Mr. Treasurer, what this does that we're not able to do? What is this paying for that we're not able to do in its absence?
Treasurer Conan, for the record, it pays for the how, right? So we know that we need more behavioral health centers, but we don't have a plan to implement them, to raise the money for them, to spend and create the jobs for them. We know that we need more broadband, but we don't have the money. And so while I do think that a use of some of the additional CARES dollars could be used for immediate work, this creates long-term resiliency and a plan for long-term resiliency that, in partnership with the existing and the ongoing economic recovery plan put forward by GOED, creates a package that will not only tell us what to do, but give us a way to do it.
Yes, Michael Brown at GOED, if I can just amplify, this is the leap forward. We've been advised by SRI that this is the biggest fall since the Great Depression in the U.S. economy, and we've been advised to start looking much further down the road here. And they prioritized with the GOED board last week, making sure we stand up the industrial bank to help bring this infrastructure, these kinds of infrastructure monies into Nevada.
Madam Chair.
Ms. Senator Brooks, if you wait just a moment. Speaker, were you done?
I think I'm for now. I'm still not entirely clear on when we say the how, what this money, and I mean, I'm probably oversimplifying it, but what this money is actually going to pay for to accomplish this. Like you said, we need broadband and we need the money to pay for broadband. Is this money going to pay for broadband? Is this money going to pay for positions? Is this money going to pay for staffing for a meeting to take place for all these entities to come together to develop a plan? I just want to know clearly what the check is written out to. Like, what exactly is it that we're talking about that is going to help us accomplish this?
Treasurer Conan, for the record, so the money funds studies that include the steps of action that need to be taken, whether or not they're regulatory. In the case of the infrastructure bank, would be things like helping to put together the bylaws so that that bank, which has been in existence conceptually since 2017, but hasn't actually done anything, can be implemented, right? We'll put together shovel-ready vehicles for broadband and the rest so that we can go raise the money to get those things done. It creates the how, is I guess the best way to put it. It's not for staff time. It's not, none of it is being spent administratively through our office or through GOED. None of it's spent for marketing or ribbon cuttings or anything else. It is literally spent for the how so that we can create the roadmap to get out of this. And I think it's important to mention that, if we want to move away from things like incentives, we need other tools. We need to be able to raise money separately. We need to be able to incent businesses separately. And one of the pieces of feedback, and I'm sure Director Brown can expand on this, that we get a lot is we have to pay businesses to come here because the infrastructure doesn't exist. And so the goal here is to fix that problem from a long-term perspective while creating short and long-term jobs.
Yes, Michael Brown, Director of GOED, for the record. One of the things that's coming out of our planning is that we need to focus on our infrastructure in the state as part of economic development in a large way. And that this is really seed corn or the vehicle that starts that process with the treasurer to attract that kind of private sector capital into an industrial bank. But those investors need the confidence of these kinds of studies so that we can start that process. Like I say, this is looking down the road. This is not immediate relief. This is trying to build a system to attract money to Nevada.
Director Brown, do we have businesses? I'm trying to get to something concrete. Do we have businesses who have indicated we're more likely to come if there's a study in place that will give some direction and create a vision for expanding infrastructure?
Going to also ask the treasurer to comment on that, but certainly I'll tell you that we are finding the situation where our infrastructure we need enhancements to infrastructure to kind of bring the kinds of businesses we're going to need in a post-pandemic economy.
As Treasurer Conine, for the record, I can be succinct here. Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, do you have any other questions?
Not at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Mr. Conine and Mr. Brown. This is the exact problem with sending us a work program with only 24 hours to go over. We have had to spend an inordinate amount of time on this program, and we have many other items to deal with, and we have to share this resource with another committee this afternoon. So I'd be happy to open it up to any other committee members that have very brief questions, but we really do need to move on. But my recommendation to you in the future is to please send us a more vetted program and give us time to have staff reach out and get questions to these answers so we don't have to go through all of this to get where we need to be. So with that, I believe Senator Brooks, did you have a question?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. I realize that we are in an unprecedented time and things have changed and we have gone from economic development to an economic recovery, and our literal life depends on it. And has your office, whether it's the Office of Economic Development or it's the Treasurer's Office, who's now taking on additional roles, have they grown in any substantial way during this economic crisis that we're in?
Michael Brown at Go Ahead. No, we've not. We've redeployed staff at the front end to help with the immediate relief measures that were in place. And then we were asked to take on the role of helping with economic relief measures in public health areas. But no, we've not added any folks. This is all being done internally.
Treasurer Conine, for the record, our office has 2 fewer people than it did at the start of the pandemic.
Thank you.
Ms. Monroe Moreno, did you?
Thank you. May I follow up, Madam Chair?
Briefly, please.
Well, I mean, in my day job, I've talked to people all over the country, and in this position, I talk to legislators and economic development experts all over the country. And for years, not just during this crisis that we're in, they have said that Nevada takes a piecemeal approach to this. And when you talk about, and when Mr. Speaker asked about, are there companies that would come here? The answer is resoundingly yes. And I met with the permitting council, the federal permitting council, created under the Obama administration and strengthened and grown under the Trump administration. And they said there are trillions of dollars, trillions with the T, of investment that would come to Nevada if Nevada could take a more coordinated approach on how we look at economic development and all the aspects of our government. And so I would say that not only is this necessary and it's timely, it is long overdue. And I would say the budget probably isn't large enough for the studies and the capacity, the intellectual capacity we need to bring to our state to coordinate our efforts amongst these really talented agencies we have here in the state to go forward and to diversify our economy. So I would just say this is an incredibly important issue that we need to take up immediately.
Thank you, Michael Brown, for the record. Go ahead. Yes, thank you, Senator. While there's been no staff added, there has been an unprecedented level of coordination and cooperation between your three lead business agencies, GOAD, Business and Industry, and the Treasurer's Office. Unprecedented level of integration of teams working across silos on these matters.
Senator, are we good?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry to cut you off earlier. There's just a time delay. I believe I still have other folks, so please try to make it brief if you can. Ms. Monroe Moreno, did you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I do. Listening to a number of the comments that have been made today, I want to make sure that I understand what the goal is that we need to get to. When COVID hit our community and every other community nationwide, we were not prepared for it. I hate studies. I got to just say that. I hate studies. But if it's a study that's going to help us get to a better place to be prepared for the next pandemic, then I understand why we need to have it. However, we have immediate needs in behavioral health care. So when I look at everything that's listed in this work program, there are requests for behavioral health care needs right now today. Would it be better to allocate it for this study to put the funding towards what those immediate needs are for behavioral health care as we move forward with the workforce development, the broadband, and especially our supply chain to put us in a better position for future needs for this state and give us a blueprint that we as legislators can work with and working with the departments within the state so that we're on a better end the next time.
Treasurer Conan, for the record, I think that's exactly right? And we've come forward with an amount of money and some work that represents, again, 0.08% of the total coronavirus package, and deeply support, as we have through residential, commercial, the PETS programs and other direct aid recovery pieces, that most of that money should go out on the street where it's most needed. But this $1 million, which helps set us up better, not just for this pandemic, but for future pandemics, and hopefully solves some of the long-standing issues we have on infrastructure, preparing us not just to create jobs, but to not have these problems as we go into the next pandemic, is I think a valuable use of such a small portion of the funds. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And thank you, Ms. Moreno. Assemblywoman Neal, did you still have a question or did it get answered?
I don't have a question on D3, right?
Okay.
I think.
And we are doing D3 separate from D4, so we'll finish up D3 and then move on to D4 since D4 has a lot more information provided to us, so we were able to work on that one. Are there any other questions on D3?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Please go ahead.
Actually, the question is for legal. This is CARES money, which I believe is for immediate relief, not for long-term relief. And the director has just said that it was not immediate relief. So I'm wondering, does it actually fit, or will we run afoul of the federal government and have to pay some of this money back?
This is Brian Fernley with the legal division. At least with respect to the timing, the money would need to be spent by December 30th. So my understanding of what the testimony is that the money would be spent by December, and that aspect of it is the component of it.
But what I'm wondering, Mr. Fernley, is do we have to spend that money on certain things that are related to COVID? Because I don't see this being that related to COVID. It's kind of like a stretch. It's like we're looking to spend some of the federal government money. Just if you clear that up for me so I could make an intelligent vote here.
Certainly. Part of the authorized uses for the Corona Relief Fund is for to address secondary effects of the 19 pandemic, and the Treasury Department has said that addressing the economic effects of the pandemic is part of addressing secondary effects of the pandemic. So as long as there is a relation of the spending to addressing the economic effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, that would be a permissible use.
Follow up, Mr. Wheeler? Are we good?
We're fine, man. Yeah, I think it's a big stretch, but I see what they're saying, sure.
Okay. With that, committee, I do have some concerns about this, and I've expressed my concerns. One of the biggest was the fact that we got this so late, and we've now had to have a very, very long discussion about something that we should have had answers for in the beginning. And I expressed those concerns with the treasurer and Mr. Brown, that please, if we do this again, don't send it to us if it's not quite ready for prime time. It makes it more difficult for the committee to process these items, especially in such a limited time. And I know this item is a time sensitive issue also. So with that, I would open it up to the committee as to how they would like to proceed.
So, Madam Chair, this is Assemblywoman Neal. I'm really struggling with this particular item, and I know it's time sensitive, but I also feel like we're crunched for time, because I agree with my colleague from, I believe, District 37, 40, whatever, Benitez Thompson, that I want more action, and I want projects that, as she stated, shovel ready, because the more I thought about it, how we're paying someone to tell us how to spend money, and I'm uncomfortable with it not being action. But I get, because I know for a fact, like broadband, what we went through just trying to get our kids in school in Southern Nevada, that there is true connectivity issues, and that is immediate action, and it's directly related to COVID. And so that's not necessary. We already know what the issue is. And so I feel like there are some really clear things where money could be spent now, and I don't want to vote for this. That's just the long and short of it. All right. So sorry.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Neal.
Madam Chair?
Senator Brooks.
I would like to make a motion to approve this agenda item, and I think that the time is very sensitive when we look at the time frame that the treasurer and Mr. Brown laid out for us on being able to get it done, get it contracted, get the study, and get the money spent, and go to work in raising private capital.
So I do have a motion from Senator Brooks. Do I have a second? And I would like to have it on the Assembly side if possible.
I'll second, Madam Chair.
And I have a second from Assemblywoman Howdigee. So comments on the motion?
Madam Chair.
Assemblyman Wheeler?
Yes, ma'am. Since legal tells us that this is a good use of our CARES funds, I think that anything we can do to actually build the infrastructure here and bring business in probably would be a very good idea. We We're at 13.5% unemployment now, and I'd like to see that money actually go to opening new businesses if there was a way to do that, but apparently there's not. So let's look at the future, and we need to move on from here.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Any other comments?
Senator Goycochea, broadband is an issue, especially in the rurals, and I think, as Assemblywoman Neal said, you know, we need to look at that. I think anything we can do to enhance it, and it is, again, CARES money. It will be spent somewhere.
Thank you, Senator. There's so many needs. So, any other questions or comments? These are always decisions.
I just have a quick one, Madam Chair, because I'm going to be a no on the specific proposal, but I feel like the information that I received and read about it's essentially 5 studies, and then the 6th one is a study of the studies, right? Kind of like a meta. And then I'm hearing a lot of talk about establishing an infrastructure bank, and I don't see anything in these documents that actually talk about an infrastructure bank. And I think I would be a yes if this proposal were to establish an infrastructure bank and then look at ways to garner those private investments. But that's not what I see here. And so I'm going to be a no, just because I think that the immediate need is to spend dollars. And if the idea was an infrastructure bank, then I would have loved to see the documentation proposal and layout for that. But I don't see that. But I'm just one person, so I just want to make sure I had my justification on the record.
Madam Chair.
Senator Woodhouse.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I certainly appreciate the comments made by the chair regarding the lateness of the proposal, but I really appreciate us taking the time today to get all of these questions answered. And originally, I was not in support of this because of the fact we didn't have all of the information, but I feel better now after the long discussion we've had. So I just wanted to let you all know that I will be supporting the motion for the reasons that have been brought forth in the discussion. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Senator Dennis.
Senator.
Thank you. I too just wanted to make some comments. I felt the same way. I think there was a lot of questions as to what needed to happen here. What I've heard here today, because one of my biggest frustrations as I work especially on technology issues, broadband issue is a really big issue, and we keep talking about, we know what we need to do, and we keep talking about that. But I think what this will allow us to finally figure out is how do we pay for that? And a lot of times we have that discussion, and I think that we need to have that information in order to know what to do. I too have had the same discussion with business leaders from across the country, and they always talk about infrastructure and talk about how we seem to piecemeal everything. And I think this is allowing us to look to the future on how we can find dollars to take care of these issues that we all know we have. So I had a lot of questions before, but I think at this point I'm supportive. Thank you.
So with that, if I could go ahead and ask Mr. Kompotic to go ahead and call the roll.
Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson.
No.
Assemblyman Frierson.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Tolles.
Yes.
Oh, Mr. Kompotic, I think he's skipped over.
Assemblywoman Hadagi.
Yes.
Assemblyman Kramer.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Neal.
No.
Assemblywoman Monk.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Swink.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Backus.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Titus.
Yes.
Assemblyman Wheeler,
Yes.
Chairwoman Woodhouse, or Chairwoman Carlton,
No.
Senator Brooks,
Yes.
Senator Kinsella,
Yes.
Senator Dennis,
Yes.
Senator Goycochea,
Yes.
Senator Kiefer,
Yes.
Senator Parks,
Yes.
Senator Settlemeyer,
Yes.
Vice Chair Woodhouse.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Kompotic. So with that, if we could please move on to the next item, number 4, and committee members, we need to move as expeditiously as possible, but still give everything good consideration. Item number 4, Governor's Office of Economic Development, again, $1.2 million in CARES Act money for Nevada Labor Certification Plan, and procure a workforce skills matching program. I believe there were some questions on this item. I'm going to go directly to questions. I believe Senator Dennis was first up on this one.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll be quick. Mine was just on the skills matching software. Just wondering, is this an off-the-shelf thing? What is required to be implemented with our current, so that it works with the other data that we have? So if you talk a little bit about that.
Yes, Michael Brown, Director of GOAD. I'm going to turn to Deputy Director Bob Potts, who's been the lead on these two matters.
We cannot hear you, sir. Mr. Potts, there's no sound.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Can you hear me? All right. Again, sorry about that. Madam Chair, members of the committee, for the record, Bob Potts, Deputy Director with GOAD. As Director Brown mentioned early on, I've facilitated calls with economists going back to the middle of March, right? And this has been a very interesting downturn because it's been driven by policy decisions and a health response, right? As economists, we love to go to the data, and Assemblywoman Neal knows this. I worked with Assemblywoman Neal quite a bit on the data side of things. We always want to go to the data side of things to make sure that we can keep the decisions that we make and the policies that we make between the ditches, right? But in this situation, you really have to understand how economies work and the art of the art side of the economist equation. So both a science and an art. I work with a lot of different data platforms. This vendor I've worked with consistently for quite a few years now, and they are big data people. So they take very complex information, they package it up in a way that's very understandable and palatable. What really stood out in this situation, I mean, we're facing two major issues going on right now: small business struggles as well as dislocated workers. So the workforce side of things and the challenges that businesses face. There are so much crosstalk going on in the workforce side of things, and part of my effort was to get all of the workforce development, all the education partners in the state to start really working together in a consistent way. So part of me bringing this platform to this whole group, and I brought it into all the workforce boards, you know, whether it's Workforce Connections, whether it's Nevada Works, the community colleges, INSHE, OWEN, OSIT, the RDAs and their workforce development programs, bringing them all together to say, okay, what is everybody doing so that we don't plow the same ground twice and let other go fallow, okay? So that was part of it. The other part of it was to introduce them to this tool. This tool is very different than most of the other tools, and it's been in development for over 3 years, but it's really new. And it looks at data that's different than what we traditionally look at in the labor market data. It looks at what are employers really telling us on the job posting side, what are workers telling us on the resume side, and what are programs and training providers telling us on the program side, as well as information that shows up on syllabi and things like that, right? And it all goes back to this word skills, right? And skills has been a very overused word, and what we look at and what means skills to one person means a different thing. So what they've done is they've done this huge text search of this real-time data, what employers are telling us, what employees are telling us, what training providers are telling us, and they look at all these words that show up consistently titled skills. So when an employer thinks about when they put a job posting out, they'll put things in there, can work with a group. Are they forward thinking? Are they outcome oriented? Are they thoughtful? Those are the kind of words that they look at, right? So they match that to what shows up in the resumes, and then they match that to what shows up in the programs from the training providers. So it gets us outside the limitations of traditional labor market data. It complements that in a very huge way, but we're not tied to all the challenges that we're faced with this very extreme downturn and recovery period that we're trying to work through with data that is often lagged, it's modeled, it has error terms associated with it, and it tells us this is who's hiring, which is kind of what started all this. The Las Vegas Chamber has put together an economic and workforce development task force, and one of the first questions that came up is who's hiring. And nobody really knows that, but the job postings are telling us that, and this platform tells us who's hiring and what they're looking for. Then we can look at all the resumes that are out there, match them up, get them to work, and then we can look at the program providers to help, or the training providers to help fill the gaps between who's hiring and dislocated workers that are out there. So this was an effort to help address those questions, to complement what Workforce Connections is doing, what Nevada Works is doing, all the one-stop shops. It's work with Dieter, and we have partnered with Owen. Owen is going to help us operationalize this to make sure that it gets deployed out there to all the training providers, whether they be formal through the community college systems, through the four-year institutions, through the Department of Education, how it gets played into anything the CTE counselors are advising on. But for the meantime, and this is where it really matters, this is an immediate recovery tool where we can go and say, this is who's hiring, this is what they're looking for, and this is the supply side that we have in order to answer those questions. So I'll kind of leave it at that to kind of round out what you have in the materials in front of you and open it up to any questions that you might have.
So thank you for that. Mine were real specific on the technical side of the skills software. We're paying $500,000. Is there going to be an annual cost to renew that?
There is an annual cost, and honestly, Senator Dennis, that was my concern too. So it is the $500,000 annual fee. Part of what's really going to be helpful here is they're going to integrate it into the existing platforms that we use in the state, whether it's Employee NV or whatever tools that the different groups are using, the different organizations are using. $500,000 for 1 year if we don't renew it, but we can actually leverage it to get people back to work, right, during this recovery period. That's my main goal in this whole thing. Then we can work with the provider to take and build it out, to talk about career path and career explorations, to talk about aligning it to in-demand occupations that align with economic development priorities and, target sectors and building out training programs for that. But where we sit right now, it's a chance for us to get to connect people. That's the goal.
So you're saying it's $500,000 for this first year. Would it cost another $500,000 to renew it after the first year?
Yes, it would. Yep.
We would have to have that discussion. But you're saying there's still benefit even if we only do it for 1 year.
Yeah. The benefit is the 180,000 or so dislocated workers we have right now. Let's get them back as much as we can.
Great. And what about the integrating it into, you talked about integrating into the other things. You mentioned in the materials we got, integrating into the Nevada Career Explorer program. Is there a cost for that?
No, that's all packaged in.
Okay. What I'm also hearing from you is that this is addressing impacts of the corona pandemic right now by being able to get this information through this software.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all the questions I have on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Dennis, and thank you for the great answers to the questions. Very, very succinct, and it looks like this will actually be a tool that'll be able to be used very quickly and will have definite impact on folks actually being able to get jobs. So we do appreciate that. Are there other questions from other committee members at this time?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Assemblywoman Neal?
So 2 quick questions. First one, good seeing you, Mr. Potts. Love you. Lag time. Lag time on what's going to be the lag time for this particular data. And then 2, great on the job matching skills, but what are the discussions around aligning business development to then match those workers within the space? And I'm asking that because in some of the language it had degree programs, typically we'll place people in degree programs to buy us time until an industry can come up to speed to hire. And so I'm wondering, what are our conversations, because we're going to have to do new business development and support, and how our alignment of these skills is connecting that particular dot.
So this is Bob Potts again for the record. So to go back to what I said to Senator Dennis, we can hit the ground running right now in a recovery mode, right? Getting dislocated workers back to work with who's hiring, right? And so you can match that up. That can hit the ground running as soon as we get contracts signed. So that's that portion of it. But as we talked about, being able to integrate it into existing platforms with Career Explorer, the libraries are using it, or Employee NV, that's good. They will work on that, and they're very accommodating towards doing that. But what we can also talk about, to your point about business development, right, and getting, helping with expansions or companies that want to relocate to our state and everything else, then we can build into it on the back end, saying these are the directions that we want to diversify about as economy and to where we want to take it. This is the kind of staff that they're looking for. We can back into that staff that they're looking for on the kind of skills employers in those industries are looking for, and then tie it back. Then we can match those skills back up to our existing workforce, see where the gaps are, talk to our training providers to see what capacity we have to fill those gaps, and we can build on that, add more to where we lack capacity, build up and add to where we have no capacity. So this is all something that we can evolve out, and the way that I'm looking at this right now, it kind of serves as not only a recovery tool right now for these dislocated workers, but it also creates kind of a pilot program of how we can think past how we've made the connection between great employers and qualified employees, right? And so we can tie those two, that relationship together in a way that moves us forward. So I hope that helps.
It does. Thank you for that. Madam Chair, I have no
Sure.
more questions.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Neal. Other questions from other committee members? Before I do that, though, I think I need to clarify something under Senator Dennis's questions. There was a comment about a $500,000 ongoing cost. Is that for just this first round? And will you be coming back to IFC in the future to get another $500,000 to keep this program going? Where are we in the continuum on that?
Okay, again, for the record, Bob Potts, it is a $500. Once the contracts are signed, that's when it begins. It's 12 months, $500,000. Gets us through this recovery period. I think it's an amazing tool, and I've got a lot of support from different folks, Jaime Cruz, a lot of folks out there that are going to incorporate this to complement their existing systems. But it gives us a year to get through this process. Hopefully by this time next year, we have a vaccine that has great efficacy, and we're kind of moving past this. But if it is a tool that really adds value in ways that are unprecedented, that we've not had before, then we can think of a different funding mechanism. It may come to IFC. I can't see the future that far off. But what my hope is that we can get all of the players in the state to pitch in on this, to do grants, to throw this to the economic development Development Agency, to see once if there's different ways, if we decide we want to move forward with this because it adds such value and an ongoing, then we can do that. But in the meantime, it helps get us through this crisis.
So if I heard you correctly, there is no consideration of putting this within a budget for the next budget cycle in 21, that this conversation probably wouldn't happen until next fall, and we'd have a better feel for what the needs are and where we actually are in the state. Is that correct?
That's correct, Madam Chair. Bob Potts.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to make sure we had it clear for the record. Other committee members, other questions on this item?
Madam Chair.
I had a quick one.
Did I hear Ms. Benitez Thompson?
Yes, but I believe another member also has questions. I just had a quick one, but I can hold on.
And so another voice that I heard?
That was Assemblywoman Tolles. I'll defer to.
Yeah. Oh, Assemblywoman Tolles, go ahead, please.
All right, thank you, and appreciate this. I think it's vital, and it directly relates to getting workers back to getting Nevadans back to work. So I appreciate particularly the database. And I know that there are a number of other states, Arizona, Connecticut, Kansas, New Jersey, Tennessee, and Oklahoma that I've researched that have similar workforce database programs. Are you modeling this after similar, are they using the same software that we're talking to the contractor on? And could you perhaps direct us to which states so we might just be able to get a visual preview of what we have to look forward to?
So I'll answer the last question first. Again, Bob Potts. I can send a link to everybody, and you can play with it. It's an amazing user, easy to use interface. I think this is how it works, right? So on the front end, you've got a worker that's dislocated. If they can put in their skills, they can do that. They can, laundry list, but you can actually scan your resume in, and it'll pull that off, and it'll match it off right from the scanned resume. So it does all that. It's fairly new, but quite honestly, Nevada is at the cutting edge on this. There are, I think they've deployed, and I can't give you the exact number, but I think they've got it deployed in 12 different instances. Most of it's in local communities. It's not a statewide application. What this includes is that every person in this state will have access to this tool. It will not just be for guidance counselors. It won't just be for one-stop shops. Anybody and everybody, that's what this license includes, access to this tool. I think that, Nevada has been in the lead on the workforce development side of things and really trying to get all the agencies to work together to align workforce development and educations to the jobs of the future and where the future of work is going, to stay in front of things like automation and things like that. Okay. What this does is this takes it to a new level because it lets us break the barrier of traditional labor market data and actually see once what real people, real businesses, real classrooms look like and tie them all together.
Thank you. And certainly hear your enthusiasm in that answer. If you do know, and it sounds like you're saying that this is groundbreaking, that it won't be similar to the other programs in, let's say, Arizona, New Jersey, Kansas, Oklahoma, et cetera. But I'd be just interested to see a comparison with, hopefully we are groundbreaking and do laps around other states and others follow us. It would be wonderful. My second question would just have to do with, do we also anticipate that that's going to link to, I know, for example, that this legislative body passed a scholarship database bill in conjunction with the state treasurer's office to make a link for people who are interested in training programs, workforce development programs, scholarship for education. Is there going to be any kind of crossover nexus? So for example, if I'm leaving the hospitality industry and I want to go into, there's availability in jobs as a certified nursing assistant, but I need an 8-week certification program to get there and I need some scholarship funding to help pay for that. Will this also be incorporated so that we can help people retrain in order to place them in a new career pathway?
So Assemblywoman Toles Bob Potts. So getting back to what you said before, we do have the tools are a lot of the existing tools that we have are very similar to what Oklahoma and some of the other states have. Some of these other states are cutting edge too. Tennessee, for instance, is using information like this as well. But yes, what it will do to your second question is it actually tells them what the real gaps are and what they need to do to get there. But it goes deeper than just talking about how do you tie, an industry code to an occupation code to a certified instructional program code, right? It talks about what's actually being taught in the class, right? And how that ties back as far as the content of the class ties to the content of what employers are looking for, ties back to the content of the anatomy of the person. What is their educational experience? What's their work experience, right? So it's more of a holistic, comprehensive look at the whole pipeline that goes beyond just formal diplomas and certificates of accomplishment. So again, it really complements and builds on what we have with the added utility of getting people back to work right away. So anyway.
And connection to the funding piece.
Yes.
To be, well, because I may want to switch careers and I see there's a job that matches my interests and my skill set, but it's going to cost me $1,000, and because I'm unemployed, I don't have that $1,000 to pay for that. It will also somehow link to available grants, scholarships, to help me get that training to get then placed into a new industry.
So this is Bob again. So it doesn't do that now, but again, as we're building this out and customizing it for Nevada, those are the kind of things that we can ask the vendor to integrate into the process. Again, this is something that's going to have to, just like the earlier programs we talked about. So many of these conversations are going to have to be one-offs at the one-stop shops, where we're going to have to get folks up to speed how to use this tool, which won't take a lot of time because it's very user-friendly. But also, that's where you bring in all the existing workflow products that we have right now and existing ways that we have to do things. You add this layer on top of it, but then you can have a holistic picture, and then you can come back and you can say, you don't have the money, this is what the tuition costs, this is how we can come up with funding instruments, scholarships, or whatever. There's ways we can build that into that, and I'm happy to have those conversations to make it cohesive and comprehensive.
Thank you so much.
Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson.
Thank you so much. So just wanted to see from the user's end of this, what will it look like for them? So let's say hypothetically someone's lost their job at a big box chain store, and they have people working with them to help meet their basic needs, but they are still job searching. So would it be direction from their caseworker or from community workers or just themselves to find one landing spot that they go into? Like right now, we've got the Nevada Career Explorer where they can search for some stuff if they're lower skilled or they don't have that post-secondary. We've got Employ Nevada, and then we've got some websites on DEETR. So would it also be like a consolidation of all of those so that the job seekers and those people who help them find the jobs are just referring them to one landing spot?
So the conversations that we're having right now, and I've talked to all of those groups that you've mentioned, right? And it could be standalone, or it could, we're going to integrate it into Career Explorer, we're going to integrate it into Employee NV, so that if they're using those existing tools, it's part of that, that interface. But it could be standalone too, and the user interface is so intuitive and so easy to work with that, you know, somebody at home by themselves could do this, and I think it would give clear direction and a better understanding of the world they live in and what the opportunities exist for them. And you know, we can build it out so that there's links on, you know, Nevada's version of this. It would be customized in the interface for the state, right? To say, if you're interested in finding out about scholarships, click here. You know, those kind of things can all be put into this. So very flexible. The point is the amazing amount of big data. They've got 30,000 skills identified in this system with that does all this matching in the background to, you know, to really talk about people, the human element. So. Hope I answered your question.
I think that does. I think that right now, as we have people who are job seeking and we have people who are, you know, helping them, so many of the folks are doing it just kind of from their phone. And I know they've talked about difficulty in trying to, for example, going through the Dieter site and going through the job site there. And I think they have to do a unique resume upload for every job. It's kind of like a site that refers you to a site, right? And so if it's something that's going to help folks kind of get to one landing place where they can keep, you know, a resume and it's scanning for a skill set, I think that makes it easier because I certainly think we need that consolidation that makes it easier on the front end as well as the back end to consolidate those systems. It sounds exciting.
So if I could throw in this Bob Potts again, to that point, that was a deep concern of mine early on, right? When I first talked about this a bit, you know, plowing the same ground twice, another going fallow, so much crosstalk going on and disconnects, right, between different workforce trainers and providers, educators, right? And using this as a tool to open up the conversation, to get them at least talking together and get everybody kind of on the same page. But I also wanted to have a platform that, you know, somebody that just wasn't comfortable showing up at a one-stop shop or whatever, they could just do it on their own and they could do it from their phone.
And so I just have one final question, and Senator Dennis may have asked this and I might have missed it, but I always hear when we have conversations in Ways and Means about the programming cost and the time. Can you tell me what kind of time frame you're looking at? And if you covered this, I apologize, but I just wanted to make sure that I understood. We know the annual software cost now, but what is the actual time frame on this?
Well, I think we could get, you know, again, Bob Potts, sorry. We could have this, once the contracts are signed, we could probably have this up and running by the middle of next month, right? And then we can continue to build out the rest of it to tie into Employee NV, to have it tie into Career Explorer. Those are things that we could add on, but we could actually get it launched by the middle of next month, I believe.
And
Yep,
is this going to
DOE.
be for RFP or has a vendor already been selected?
They're the only vendor that does this.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. Other questions from other committee members? Hearing none, I would go ahead and open it up to the committee.
I'll make a motion. So moved.
I have a motion from Ms. Benitez Thompson to process D4. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
From Senator Woodhouse. Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this? Hearing none. Mr. Kompotek, if you could please call the roll.
Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson.
Yes.
Assemblyman Frierson.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Tolles.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Haudegi.
Yes.
Assemblyman Kramer.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Neal.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Monk.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Swank,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Backus,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Titus,
Yes.
Assemblywoman Wheeler,
Yes.
Chair Carlton,
Yes.
Senator Brooks,
Yes.
Senator Kinsella,
Yes.
Senator Dennis,
Yes.
Senator Goycochea,
Yes.
Senator Kiefer,
Yes.
Senator Parks,
Yes.
Senator Settlemeyer,
Yes.
Vice Chair Woodhouse.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Kompotek. So with that, we can go to item number 5, Department of Tourism and Cultural Affairs, Tourism Development Fund. If we could go ahead and bring up the appropriate person.
Madam Chair, Director Scolari, Director of Tourism and Cultural Affairs.
Okay, if you could speak up just a bit.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's better. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
If you could just give us a brief overview, and then we have a couple of questions, please.
Okay. Well, our request for coronavirus relief funding is in response to the effect that the pandemic has had on our tourism funding. To give you some context, the legislatively approved lodging tax revenue related to marketing for the Division of Tourism was just over $15 million. Our projections now, due to closure and the reduced visitation, is just over 4 million. So this request for 4.6 million for tourism recovery programs would effectively double our ability to assist our rural tourism communities with their own tourism recovery efforts. So some of the things outlined in the request include our pandemic-related revisions to travelnevada.com and our visitor's guide. Both travelnevada.com and the visitor's guide are kind of the center of our visitation universe, in that the majority of visitors will refer to either one of them in regard to their trip planning. And we've had to do extensive revisions in terms of educating them about, what's open, of what health measures have been undertaken, what they can expect in regard to their experiences in Nevada. So the website, the visitor's guide, we have undertaken a campaign called Discover Your Nevada, because all of our intelligence related to traveler sentiment indicates that there's a very low comfort level in terms of traveling via plane, and people's kind of radius of comfort is relatively small. So we want to encourage people to explore their own communities, and we hope to stimulate the economy by encouraging Nevadans to explore Nevada. So we have extensive plans and a campaign to assist them to do so. We have already in place 10 branded road trips, but have specific Discover Your Nevada related components to that. We have built a Discover Your Nevada webpage, which will feature various communities and what's available there, all of their visitor assets and what fans can expect in regard to locals and resident deals and packages. We also, of course, have our recovery grants program, which is kind of a special version of our normal marketing grant program, which was suspended last spring due to lack of funding. This would be a version of it in which we have revised the guidelines to express all of the, necessary components that the Treasury has set in place, and within this very compressed period of time. So they would have to execute their marketing programs prior to December 30th, but would be their own regional and community-specific tourism recovery marketing efforts. They could either co-op with Travel Nevada in regard to the greater statewide Discover Your Nevada campaign, or they could demonstrate their own marketing recovery efforts. One of the things that has happened is the tourism economy in smaller communities has been disrupted, not only through the lack of lodging tax, but also visitor spending related to the inability to put on events. Large scale events, of course, don't comply with current COVID reopening parameters. So, tourism is still such a vital part of rural tourism economies, and each of these programs outlined within this request is a way to assist them and have our Travel Nevada's enjoyed by smaller communities throughout the state.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any questions?
Yes, thank you. So I guess my first question would be, how was the $1.5 million decided on for the Discover Your Nevada campaign? Was that based on previous type budgets, or what was the plan around that?
It was. The various components of that program have already been delineated, and our commission has already approved $300,000 for the first phase of Discover Your Nevada spending. I do have my deputy director on the call. I don't know if she'd want to address some of the components of the 1.5.
Hi, this is Emmy Kowchak, Deputy Director of Tourism, for the record. Sure, we did start at the $300,000 level, and based on some quotes and proposals that I received for other media buys, I expanded on that to kind of do a phased approach, and also baseline, mid-reach, and high-reach levels, so that we can get into other things and kind of just reach more people, particularly for broadcast, digital, and some other components.
And are these the same vendors we've used in the past, and are they Nevada vendors, or are we going out of state to contract this out?
This is to reach people in Nevada, so a lot of these buys are in Nevada, but of course, we have to be where the visitors are. So if we're working with an OTA, or we're working with anybody else that we have traditionally worked with, like a website, then we are going back to them. But this isn't something we do this on a regular basis with our media vendors. This isn't this just expands that.
So it's not going out to RFPs to companies who are here in the state that might want to do this business. You're just going to go back to the folks that you've had in the past?
No, this is already, we already have a media buying company under agents. Our agency of record already is contracted for that. And then I'm doing direct buys on my own.
Okay, all righty, thank you. So if you could expand and explain upon how this is different than the rural grants program, the expenditure that we approved in 2019, the 2019 legislature, and what those expenditures were for, and how is this different?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is the same amount, but it is a very different program in that the requirements and the guidelines will have to be met in accordance with the coronavirus relief funding guide rails. So they will have to comply the same way Travel Nevada would, which is this will only be marketing in regard to direct COVID response. So they will have to be telling the world, that they're open, they're safe. They will, our real goal here is to encourage responsible travel and safe, memorable experiences. And we'll expect our tourism partners to do the same. Also, we would expect them to submit application for programs that weren't in prior budgets. So this isn't business as usual. This really is in regard to marketing and COVID-related restart. It is also as our historic marketing program is a reimbursement process. So any of the expenditures submitted would have to meet our COVID requirements.
And if you could explain how you're going to portion off the cost for staff on the position costs, will they be split? How will you handle that?
Well, that is the payroll for the final quarter of the calendar year for our public relations staff, our marketing staff, our industry relations staff that will be executing these programs. We within the Division of Tourism really were hit hard and had a number of layoffs and really don't have the budget that we can, give the work like this to outside consultants. We're doing the majority of this work in-house. And so that payroll will assist in getting this work done effectively.
Okay. Committee members, other questions? I don't believe I'm hearing anyone, and I don't see any messages or hands coming up. So with that, I would go ahead and open it up to process this item. D5.
Madam Chair, I will move approval.
I have a motion for approval from Senator Woodhouse and a second from.
I'll second, Madam Chair.
And I'm sorry, who was that?
Assemblywoman Howdigy.
Assemblywoman Howdigy, thank you very much. So I have a second from Assemblywoman Howdigy. Any questions or comments on the motion?
Madam Chair, I do. This is Assemblywoman Swank.
Yes.
So I've been advised that I should abstain from this vote because my employer engages in tourism industry in rural Nevada and may be applying for this grant.
Thank you very much, Assemblywoman. We appreciate that. So Mr. Kompota can make that note that Assemblywoman Swank will be abstaining on this vote. So with no other comments or questions, I believe we can go ahead and call for the roll.
Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson.
Yes.
Assemblyman Fyerson.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Tolles.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Howdigy.
Yes.
Assemblyman Kramer.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Neal.
Yes.
I'm recording Assemblywoman Swink as an abstention. Assemblywoman Monk.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Backus.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Titus.
Yes.
Assemblyman Wheeler.
Yes.
Chair Carlton.
Yes.
Senator Brooks.
Yes.
Senator Kinsella.
Yes.
Senator Dennis.
Yes.
Senator Goycochea.
Yes.
Senator Kiefer.
Yes.
Senator Parks.
Yes.
Senator Settlemeyer.
Yes.
Vice Chair Woodhouse.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kompotek. I had asked Vice Chair Woodhouse to take item number 6 for me, and I'll be back in just a moment. Senator Woodhouse?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Yes, we will move on to agenda item number 6, which is the Department of Health and Human Services Public and Behavioral Healthcare Facilities Regulation. And could we have the appropriate spokesperson please come on and give us a short, brief explanation of this item, and then we'll take questions.
Good morning, Margot Chappell for the record. Excuse my technical difficulties in getting that unmuted and also on video. I'm Deputy Administrator for the Division of Public and Behavioral Health, and we are seeking approval, requesting work program C52880 be approved and processed as a 15-day work program due to the urgent need to hire a management service company. On August 21st, the Division of Public and Behavioral Health suspended the license of a residential facility for groups in Reno due to unsafe conditions. I can give you some possible details on that, but we contacted the Quality Healthcare Asset Management to assist with the temporary management in the facility and relocation of its residents. On August 27th, our division received approval to proceed with an emergency contract with that same company. Initial costs can be paid for by our healthcare facilities admin penalty budget, which is budget account 3217. The balance of the cost will need to be paid out of the regulation budget account of 3216. This work program is requesting to move funds from the reserve category to a newly established category for this purpose. It is the intention of the division to have the licensee reimburse budget accounts 3216 and 3217 for costs incurred. But in the meantime, DPBH does need to pay the management company. That's it. If you have any questions, thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to go to Assembly first.
Thank you, Vice Chair Woodhouse. I have just a couple of questions. One was, I know that there was going to be the recovery of the fundings from the existing facility. What's the likelihood of them being able to repay that bill that was sent to them?
I'm not sure I can respond to that directly in terms of the likelihood of them paying, but we do have mechanisms to collect that money back through legal action and the controller's office. We also understand that it's possible that this building, the facility has decided to close and the property will be for sale. And so one of the options may be to put a lien on the property if we do not get repaid.
Okay, thank you. And then the other one was, of the residents, how many of those have already been successfully placed?
When we first went into the facility, there were 80 residents, and last I knew there were 58 remaining. And the county and the ombudsman's office and our team are working, and the management team are working to find placements for the others, hoping to have that done by the middle of October, if possible.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Thank you very much. And we'll go to Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson.
Thank you so much. And I want to say, if I am correct, I think, is this the first time that we have used the SNAC where the state comes in, finds a serious deficiency within a facility, and then puts in a temporary management company in place? It feels like it's the first time, but
I apologize. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Margot Chappell for the record. This is actually the second time on record that we've used this particular management company. The first time was in 2016, and they assisted us with closing down another facility. Prior to that, we cannot find history that this mechanism has been used heretofore.
Okay. I think this is really good because it shows that I think that in the past, when there were concerns about a facility and the ability for the state to go in and to protect those residents and to kind of address the deficiencies with business, we have kind of an audit trail that tells us that that's been difficult for us with some of these facilities. So I'm just really glad that when we started to hear in the community that there were problems and then saw the state come in although it was troubling, it was really reassuring to kind of see this process work out and work right, that we had that temporary management program go in and you knew that the residents were going to be safe. I mean, ultimately it is really hard because these are the poorest of the poor who live at that facility. Most of them, I believe the facility had started accepting the home and community waiver service grants. So you have a lot of people who cannot afford to live anywhere else and who could be very easily exploited. So I know it will be hard to place those 68 folks who are left. We just don't have the type of housing available or group homes available. But this to me just shows a system that's actually working, that we're doing right by this very vulnerable population.
Thank you.
I have a question, Madam Vice Chair, if possible.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. My question revolves around what the state is already obligated to inspect this facility, is it not?
Correct.
So when was
For the record, yes, that's correct.
All right, so I'm curious about the process here. This happened apparently after a complaint and took over on August 17th. What was the last inspection time prior to that? In other words, was this something they weren't capable of doing any longer? When had they been inspected? Was the state not going in there? Is the state behind on inspections and it took somebody complaining to get action? I'm just a little concerned.
Thank you very much. I can give you a very comprehensive schedule. And actually your staff also your fiscal staff has a schedule of when they were inspected and what the findings were as well. But just very briefly, they have been cited. They were cited 7 different times in 2019, and they have been visited and cited another 6 or 7 times in just the calendar year 2020. The issues continued. They did not resolve or address many of them when we initially went in early September, and so that led to this process being implemented.
Okay, so early September was the last time you had inspected them, and then since the COVID outbreak and some of these other things, they hadn't been inspected again since last September?
Actually, no, I can give you the specific dates. On March 27th, we had inspectors go in for a periodic inspection and a complaint inspection, which was substantiated. In May of 2020, there was a complaint which was substantiated, and there were 3 citations. In July, there was a grading resurvey, and there were 2 low-level repeat citations based on early March. On the 10th of July, another complaint investigation was done, and it was substantiated with a number of low-level citations. On August 13th, there was another complaint inspection that occurred. It was substantiated with an immediate jeopardy and numerous high-level citations. That was the first time we went in, and then in September was when we took the action during wellness checks to go check on those residents that live there.
It sounds like that certainly there's been some awareness, and you're doing a good job keeping Nevadans safe. Absolutely, this difficult times. And then it was an accumulation of all of these, and finally it was a real true safety for these residents. I know it's hard and still finding places for these folks, and so you're caught kind of in that quandary, and I appreciate all you've done. Is there something else in retrospect you could have done sooner? Warning after warning after warning after warning, and then suddenly, you have to just ultimately make that decision to close a facility. And I know that's difficult because we lack facilities. So again, I appreciate what you're trying to do. Just want to make sure, in retrospectively, we haven't caused harm or damage to residents when we knew that maybe there was a problem.
Margot Chappell, for the record, we involved our Deputy Attorney General in every decision made, and we followed due process with the provider. In the end, just before this action was taken, the provider was given the opportunity to come into compliance and did not. Hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Well, yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. And again, I appreciate all you do trying to keep Nevadans safe. I know it's difficult living in that world myself. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Neal, did you have a question on this one?
Yes, thank you,
Go
Madam
ahead.
Chair. So I just had a quick question around the ombudsman. Is since the findings, is it also a part of the ombudsman to try to connect the families or their advocate with some kind of legal services, not so they can deal with some of the issues or abuses that they went through?
I'm Margot Chappell, for the record. I can't talk on behalf of the Ombudsman's office as I'm not a part of their office. Somebody from their office would need to answer that question. I apologize.
Okay.
What I can tell you, again, Margot Chappell, for the record, is that the Ombudsman office is working with Washoe County Senior Services and the temporary manager to do a complete assessment on every resident to find appropriate housing. And Washoe County Social Services or Human Services Agency is confident that they can find placement appropriately for every one of the residents there.
Woman Neal, does that take care of your question?
It doesn't, but I just assumed that the ombudsmen were not available to answer.
We'll ask staff to follow up on that and get an answer back to the committee. And I think that might suffice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions on item D6 from committee members? I do not see any or hear any. So I will take a motion to approve item D6.
So moved. Senator Dennis.
Okay, thank you. Senator Dennis has moved to approve. We have a second from.
Second.
Thank you. That Assemblywoman Audakey. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we will ask Mr. Kropotnik to call the roll.
Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson.
Yes.
Assemblyman Frierson.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Tolles.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Howdagee.
Yes.
Assemblyman Kramer.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Neal.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Monk.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Swank.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Backus.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Titus.
Yes.
Assemblyman Wheeler.
Yes.
Chair Carlton.
Yes.
Senator Brooks.
Yes.
Senator Kinsella.
Yes.
Senator Dennis.
Yes.
Senator Goycochea.
Yes.
Senator Kiefer.
Yes.
Senator Parks.
Yes.
Senator Settlemeyer.
Yes.
Vice Chair Woodhouse.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. And I see that Chair Carlton is back, so we'll turn the agenda back to her and we'll go on to D7.
Thank you very much, Senator Woodhouse. I appreciate your assistance on that. So we'll go ahead and proceed with item number D7, the immunization program discussion. If we could go ahead and have our folks that will be presenting queued up, if they could give us a brief overview on this, and we can ask our couple of questions that we have. Thank you very much.
Good morning. For the record, I am Candace McDaniel, the Chief for our Bureau of Child, Family, and Community Wellness, and I'm joined by Shannon Bennett, the Manager of the Nevada's immunization program. In front of you today is a work program requesting funds, slightly over 1.8 million to support our immunization program. These are new funds from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to support Nevada's statewide planning and distribution efforts around the COVID-19 vaccine. These funds must be expended by June 30th of 2021. With these funds, each state must develop a COVID-19 vaccine response plan following the CDC guidance. Ultimately, the CDC needs to be provided the plan and approved before it can be considered a formal document. The plans are due to the CDC no later than October 16th. CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, or ACIP, the National Institutes of Health, the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine are working at the federal level to determine populations of focus and ensure equitable access for the first doses of the COVID-19 vaccine that become available. The Nevada State Immunization Program is following this very closely and will update internal planning documents when ACIP and those groups previously mentioned make their recommendations for critical populations. The goal is to ensure that the state, every county, and our healthcare providers are prepared to immunize every Nevadan. Right now, our efforts are focusing on enrolling vaccination providers into the COVID-19 vaccination program using CDC's required documentation. These providers will also be set up in our Nevada WebIZ, the information system that we hold responsibility for, if they not are already participating users. The implementation will be done in a phased approach because there won't be a lot of vaccine initially in the beginning of this process. In phase 1, we will work with the urban and rural hospitals directly, as their staff should be prioritized for the first vaccine doses available. Hospitals will order COVID-19 vaccine through our Nevada WebIZ system, the same way that they do with other publicly supplied vaccines. That order is transmitted to the centralized distributor in Aurora, Colorado, and then which is responsible for filling the orders and shipping the vaccine. Through later phases, more vaccination providers will be brought on into rolling enrollments to ensure administration capacity for all Nevadans. And that truly just means that we want to ensure that there are enough providers with enough vaccine storage and administration capacity to reach every Nevadan. And with that, I'd be happy to accept some questions.
Okay. So if you could elaborate a bit on the communication strategy, I think it's going to be very important for the public to understand how this is going to work. There are already questions out there, and there's so much misinformation. If you could elaborate on that for us, please.
Thank you, Candace McDaniel, for the record. So we are very much working through a collaborative effort with our coalition, Immunize Nevada, to really work on that messaging and to ensure that also all of our partners in the community as well are very well informed, and we can be able to really provide that support and even really standard approach to what that communication looks like. So now if Shannon Bennett has any other input to provide on that.
Sure. Shannon Bennett, for the record, I would just say that we are focused on being as transparent as we possibly can be with Nevadans as we learn more information, definitive information that we can share with them.
Well, thank you very much. And I wouldn't want to speak for the whole committee or the whole legislature, but we all have our ways of reaching out to folks. So I would be more than happy that when we have vital information to get to folks, I think those of us that serve can help with that communication also. The more they hear it from different places, I believe the more comfortable folks will be. So consider us a resource also. We want to make sure everybody knows what's going on. So with that, with a lot of these items, I'll go to Dr. Titus first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to ask a question. I have a couple concerns. And first, I want to actually say a thank you to our governor who listed and allowed mention of vaccination administration by pharmacy techs with the proper training, because I think, again, the access to these vaccines are critical. So I think that was a good first step. I have some concerns about this, however, in that we already know that Nevada ranks, I think, close to the bottom on flu vaccines. And so how will this be more successful getting this vaccine out than the flu vaccine? And is there any thought that, I know this is CARES Act money, I know this has to go to the corona pandemic, but can we pair it with also making sure that we encourage folks to get their flu vaccine? So that's my first question.
Thank you, Dr. Titus. Candace McDaniel for the record. And just one aspect to this, this is actually an allocation from the CDC and not CARES funding. But we very much recognize that this flu vaccine, and particularly in this time period, is incredibly important. And so some of the messaging and conversations we're having with a lot of our partners is to truly, we want to push and make sure that if you can please get your flu vaccine by Nevada Day, that's truly our goal, and something that we feel really, really strongly about. And I think that with, we really want to come from the place of planning. And so making sure that our job really is to make sure and look at any barriers to access are addressed. And so a lot of this planning really does address those things and trying to collaborate with as many interested parties as possible. I will say that we are kind of using this pandemic flu approach. And so very much utilizing the flu vaccine and then moving and pivoting to the COVID vaccine. So, and we do share that, that concern with a very low flu, especially the adult flu rate. So definitely something that we are continuously trying to work with our partners.
Great. Thank you for that. And then my next question is, under the list of the work program, one of the things, the criteria, you're going to identify specific groups such as frontline healthcare workers that should receive the vaccine first, and then second and third. And there's already a tiered program out for vaccine administration and crisis intervention and who gets these vaccines. And, I don't see on here the most vulnerables. So one of the priorities when you have a limited vaccine, we would want to make sure we identify the most vulnerable. And I understand certainly frontline workers, you want to protect them because they're exposed almost daily to this. But then there's such a fear and especially of the unknown in our communities. And we know now through the rate of who's infected, who dies from this virus, who are the people at most risk. And so I would want to make sure that those folks would be at the, after the frontline workers, the healthcare workers, which have always been with all of these vaccines a priority to get this, our military, the frontline workers, et cetera. But make sure that you emphasize, if you haven't already, but I didn't see it mentioned, the most vulnerable population that we've already identified.
Thank you, Dr. Titus, for the question. And the CDC did actually publish just last week a playbook in terms of COVID-19 vaccine. And so there is a critical population aspect to that playbook. And so actually every state is using this playbook to prepare their plans. And so I think we find some comfort in knowing that CDC does recognize these vulnerable populations. And so we really our goal is to do our best to really look at all Nevadans and then what approach we need to take to do these things. So absolutely I understand your concern and agree.
And my final question, Madam Chair, if that's all right.
Sure, go ahead, Dr. Titus.
Thank you. One of the difficulties that I see, and nurses that I have and people who give these vaccines, is accessing WebIZ. There has been in the past sometimes limited access to it. And one of the things we want to make sure is that all of these are rapidly put into WebIZ so we know who got the vaccine, who didn't, and so when somebody shows up again to get it or whatever, we can quickly identify. So are you expanding the WebIZ access to not just the people who administer it, but techs and those type of folks, or have we worked out all the bugs on WebIZ?
Thank you, Dr. Tice, for the question, Candace McDaniel. I think one of the aspects to this particular work program is actually we're going to be sort of enhancing our WebIZ with a mobile module. So especially when we're looking at those points of dispersing out in areas where there may not be great internet access, we have also included some iPad tablets. So to pair with this module, so that the data can be input no matter the sort of where the service is at in that certain area. And then as soon as you have internet access, it can be uploaded to the system.
Great. Thank you for all the good work you were doing. This is so essential to getting Nevada safe and back to work and our economy back and mostly saving lives. So I thank you all the work and great information. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, for the questions.
Thank you, Dr. Titus. Are there other questions from other committee members at this time? I appreciate this item coming forward. It is better to be prepared no matter when the vaccine shows up. We just need to be ready for it. So, and glad to hear that there's going to be a push for the flu vaccine. Also, we want to make sure folks get their flu shots, especially this year. Hearing no other questions, I believe we can go ahead and process this last item on our agenda under item number D. So I would accept a motion from Senator Woodhouse and a second from Ms. Benitez Thompson. Are there any questions or comments on that motion? Hearing none, I would ask Mr. Kompotek to call the roll.
Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson.
Yes.
Assemblyman Frierson.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Tolles.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Haudegi.
Yes.
Assemblyman Kramer.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Neal.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Monk.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Swank.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Backus.
Yes.
Assemblywoman Titus.
Yes.
Assemblyman Wheeler.
Yes.
Chair Carlton.
Yes.
Senator Brooks.
Yes.
Senator Kinsella.
Yes.
Senator Dennis.
Yes.
Senator Goycochea.
Yes.
Senator Kiefer.
Yes.
Senator Parks.
Yes.
Senator Settlemeyer.
Yes.
Vice Chair Woodhouse.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kompotek. We appreciate that. That concludes our business under item number D. We do have some surprise business today that was not agendized. So Ms. Jones, hold on to your chair. Today, I would like to read into the record a resolution that the IFC committee is doing to thank Ms. Jones for all of her wonderful work that she has done. So while we are preparing, we'll do our 2-minute transition to public comment. And during that time, I'm going to read this into the record. And then if other members would like to make comments, I will open it up to other comments. So whereas Cynthia Cindy A. Jones grew up in Minden, Nevada, graduating from Douglas High School and the University of Nevada, Reno, and whereas Cindy has served the state of Nevada for 30 years with loyalty and dedication, and whereas Cindy's state service includes the Public Service Commission of Nevada, beginning in September the 24th of 1990, the Department of Business and Industry, the Department of Employment Training and Rehabilitation, and the Budget Division of the Department of Administration, as well as serving as the administrator of the Employment Security Division for over 7 years and the Deputy Director of the Department of Administration prior to her service with the Legislative Counsel Bureau. And whereas Cindy started her service with the Legislative Counsel Bureau as the Assembly Fiscal Analyst in September of 2012, only months before the 2013 legislative session. And whereas immediately following the 2013 legislative session, Cindy, along with 3 of her other fiscal colleagues, forged ahead through the night, helping to complete the uncompleted business of the 2013 legislature during the 27th special session. And whereas Cindy's legislative service has included 4 regular sessions and 6 special sessions, serving 2 Ways and Means chairs over the period of time. And whereas Cindy's service has included numerous IFC committee meetings, and during the 2019-2020 interim date, Cindy served as primary staff for 18 IFC meetings, 10 more meetings that would normally have occurred during this period of time. And whereas Cindy's work ethic and dedication to the state of Nevada has been unwavering during her 30 years of service, and whereas Cindy has served as an inspiration and role model to new and seasoned analysts alike, and is known to be kind and caring towards her staff, always thinking about their welfare and well-being, often sometimes before herself. And whereas Cindy has always made sure that people around her were well-fed, with an overflowing candy dish in her office and delicious baked goods every Saturday and Sunday during session. And whereas Cindy's enhanced communications and built a culture of trust through her open door policy, always welcoming people in for a chat while sitting cross-legged in her office chair wrapped in a blanket. Whereas Cindy is a caring, supportive, and knowledgeable leader with a big and warm smile whose presence will be sorely missed now, and therefore be it resolved by the Interim Finance Committee of the State of Nevada that the members of the committee do hereby commend Cindy Jones for her lifetime of dedicated service to the state of Nevada and express our best wishes for a wonderful and well-deserved retirement. And be it further resolved that the Secretary of the Interim Finance Committee prepare and transmit a copy of this resolution to Miss Cindy Jones. Cindy, thank you very much. So with that, I'd be happy to open it up to other members to make comments.
Madam Chair.
Senator Woodhouse.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Ms. Jones, I would like to extend to you my most sincere thanks and appreciation for your work and your support these many meetings and legislative sessions. You are truly a hero and someone that we can always count upon. Retirement is often bittersweet. We will miss you. I will miss you. But we wish you the happiest retirement ever. So thank you, Cindy.
Thank you, Senator.
Madam Chair.
Speaker Frierson.
If I may, and I'm glad you mentioned Ms. Jones sitting cross-legged in her chair. I never know how she's done that. I've sat next to her for years. The thing that I think is reflected in the resolution, but if I could state it simply, is that Ms. Jones loves Nevada, and it shows in everything that she's done how much she loves Nevada. It is not lost on me how important it is for folks that have put in so much time and sacrificed so much for our state, that that it was not all for naught. And while I don't know that we have earned the service that Ms. Jones has provided us, we certainly don't frequently deserve it. We have hugely benefited from her work and her service and her friendship. And so it's impossible for us to put in this kind of time and be in it together, making the tough decisions that we have to make without, developing a friendship as well. So I appreciate your service and your love for the state and for your friendship. Just know, no matter what, that we all do this to make it better than we found it, and leave a little bit of ourselves, on the field for the next person to pick up. You've done right by us, and you set us up with a wonderful replacement that you helped prepare. And I think that is all a reflection of your love for this institution and for the state. I look forward to staying in touch. We'll certainly miss you in the legislative process, but you've done so right by the state, and we will certainly carry the lessons learned from you on and teach it not only to new staff, but new legislators who need examples like you of how to do this job. So thank you, congratulations, and we'll certainly it's gonna be hard for you to get away from me, so I'll find you.
Ms. Benitez Thompson?
I want to thank Mrs. Jones so much for the past 5 years of help that I've received from you sitting on this committee. And I think some of that help is the help just to get up to speed as a new member and the comfort level that you created so that I had a place to ask the most silly questions or to help me understand formulas, to help me understand acronyms, because state budgeting is so difficult and tricky, and you always created a safe space where questions could be asked, and that's where learning really happens. So I think of you in so many ways as a teacher because I learned so much from you. I also think it's important because I know that we see it, but I know oftentimes the public doesn't, the amount of work and hours that staff like you, Cindy, put in, that when we're in session and we have those late nights and then we're right back at it the next morning, that essentially you don't sleep during those nights because you have to reconcile everything that the committee just accomplished and then prep for what the committee's about to do, and the turnaround time to make our decisions public and to make sure numbers are flowing through right. And so the amount of work that you've given to the state is amazing. I am grateful for public servants like you who are committed to the state. I hope we have more that are coming that can be as amazing as you have been. And I thank you for being a wonderful person. I thank you for those conversations about Cancun. I thank you for the conversations in the downtime where we can just chat. And I appreciate you as a friend and the friendship that we have.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Go to Dr. Titus next.
Well, Mrs. Jones, it has been a true pleasure, and I share and echo many of the comments of my fellow legislators with the friendship and your true love and passion for Nevada. Having the rural roots like I do, you recognize the whole state, and it's so important. One of the things that struck home for me in the proclamation that was so beautifully written is the word trust. And I really think that is something that I will remember about you forever, is that didn't matter what side you were on, or who approached you, anybody that walked in your office or placed a call to you, or you came to our office, we all trusted what you said was what you knew at the time. Numbers change, more information comes in, and we always knew the numbers might change, but we knew that when you shared something with us or we asked you a question, that we could trust your response. And I think that goes so far in the world that we live in, where there's not a lot of that sometimes. So thank you from an old Nevadan to another. Thank you for being there for our great state. We will miss you, but we will remember you. And again, that friendship goes a long way, and that trust is just is unbelievable. So thank you very much, Cindy, and have that great retirement.
Thank you, Dr. Titus. Senator Kickheffer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Cindy, I think we started working together back when you were the head of the Employment Security Division, and it just strikes me that I've been asking you for stuff ever since, right? It seems like every time I call you, I'm asking for something. I'm asking for help. I'm asking for more information. I'm asking for a better understanding of something that you know more about than I do. And you've always been very gracious in sharing your knowledge and helping me do my job. And I can't say thank you enough, because it is ultimately the work that you've done that allows us to do what we do. And in your time, through all those different spots that you've been in with the state, you've made Nevada a better place. And I hope that is satisfying to you. That's, I think, what we're striving for here, and you've done it. And we appreciate it. So we're going to miss you a ton. Thank you for everything. And hopefully I can start giving something back. Thanks.
I have no other members listed in the queue right now. Is anyone else wishing to state anything at the moment?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes, Assemblywoman Neal.
So Cindy, thank you for your patience with me, and came on the committee as always tenacious, but it takes a teacher to be able to convey information to another person and have them get it in fullness. And so you were that for me, and I really appreciated the level of intelligence, like, and it's the team of women. You and Sarah were awesome. But it was a new committee for me, and you have taken all of my questions, as everyone has said, and I would email you guys and ask questions and ask sidebar questions and then ask a triple question, and then but you would have extreme patience with me, and I really appreciated that. And that I hope you have a really great retirement. 30 years is a long time, but you deserve to like bask in the sun and chill for a while. Don't come back. Don't come back. Don't feel guilt. Stay free.
Madam Chair, if I might.
This time.
Madam Chair, if I might.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Cindy, I know our time together was brief. My first session on Ways and Means was the last session, but I echo the sentiments of my colleagues. I mean, the time that you took, that I know was sacred to you. You spent as much time as I needed making sure I fully understood the budget and meeting with me whenever I had questions. And so I want to say thank you to that. And you were a treasure to Nevada. Nevada was lucky to have you for all of the years of service that you dedicated to our state. And I hope that your hardworking days are over and that you get to enjoy your retirement. So thank you, Cindy. Ms. Jones.
Madam Chair.
Any members?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Hi, Ms. Jones. I just want to tell you, thank you. As a new legislator coming into the building, even when I wasn't assigned to Ways and Means and I had fiscal questions during my first session, you were there. But once I was assigned to Ways and Means, you went out of your way to make sure that all my questions were answered. And that meant some days coming in early before session started, staying late at night to answer questions, and even making special trips when we come up on a weekend and you would make time to sit down with my fellow freshman Ways and Means legislator. Trust, as Assemblywoman Titus said, is truly how I think the legislative body feels about you. It's definitely how I feel. It's hard to find people that, whatever they say, it's not coming from any partisan anything. It's just the truth. And I trusted you with that. Thank you for being a wonderful teacher, a wonderful example of statesmanship in the building. And enjoy your retirement. You are truly a Nevada gem. And I thank you for everything you've done for the state, but especially what you have done to help me be a better legislator.
Madam Chair, Senator Dennis.
Senator Dennis.
Thank you. I'll be quick. Cindy, thank you so much. I remember your first IFC meeting, wondering, maybe you were wondering perhaps what you'd gotten yourself into, and you have far exceeded anything that perhaps you even thought you could do. And so thank you for all your great work. You've been such a great help throughout at least my involvement with you from the day you came and perhaps even before then. So thank you, and hope you have a great retirement. I agree with all the comments that have been said. You truly are a gem of Nevada, and hope you enjoy your retirement. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Wheeler.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Cindy, I just wanted to say thank you for everything you did for us, showing me the way, showing my caucus the way. I wanted to tell you that you are a gem in Douglas, and you made Douglas High School very proud, and you and are very proud. And I hope you really enjoy your retirement. Please don't do what I did and go into politics after you retire. And if you do, wait a couple years till I retire. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll be one of my lengthy speeches. Thank you, Cindy, for everything, and most of all, your patience. It's been a long run. Enjoy.
Thank you, Senator.
Ms. Jones and Senator Settlemeyer, thank you. You've been a tremendous asset to the Nevada Legislature, a true Nevadan. You've always made sure to be nonpartisan, giving everybody all the information at all times and accessible at all times. And as being a newer person on Interim Finance Committee, but being in the legislative process for a long time, I had no idea the amount of hours that you guys had to put in on IFC, and let alone the staff, is way there before us and way after us. And thanks for being there for all the questions that we've had. And I don't know how you do it, because to me, I'd be having nightmares and numbers going in my head all night long. And a matter of fact, I wouldn't be surprised if for another week or two, even after you quit doing this job, you still have nightmares and numbers. At least I will. But thank you for everything you've done for the state of Nevada.
Thank you, Senator.
Madam Chair,
Assemblywoman Tolles.
I will keep this very brief since I've had such a brief time to serve just as a substitute and then through the last special session. But I do want to say that listening to all these comments and in the brief months that I have had a chance to have the benefit of working with you, that I am truly jealous that I did not get more time to spend with you, because it's undeniable the mark that you've made on each individual in the committee and even more broadly on our state. Thank you.
Other members at this time? Hearing none, then I'll go ahead and take the chair's prerogative and wrap this up. So I first met Cindy just over the phone, Ms. Jones over the phone, back when I was a freshman chairman of Senate Commerce. And this freshman chairman had a great idea on how to do some workforce innovation stuff. And after 3 conversations with Ms. Jones, I realized I didn't have any idea what I was doing. So I learned a lot back then, back in 2009, that was. So I was thrilled when I found out that Ms. Jones would be the fiscal analyst. When I was asked to chair Ways and Means, we just had a couple of months to get ready. So we were freshmen together and we had each other's back and we just plugged through it. And I knew I could always call her no matter what and be able to get that great answer. When you're having a conversation with Ms. Jones and you ask her one of those really pointed questions where you really want to know what's going on, and you hear that pause, and then she says, well, how shall I put this? You know, you are going to get the down low on what's going on and the real answer. And that's where that trust really, really comes from, that unvarnished truth. And even when she disagrees with you, you still understand why it's there. So that has been just the most valuable tool a chairwoman could ever have, is making sure the woman who's with her and sits next to her, we can always trust each other. So that has just been super invaluable. And I will never be able to say thank you enough for you postponing your retirement and sticking with us since this pandemic hit. We truly value all your help through this fiscal crisis, and I wish you so much happiness and enjoy your time and enjoy your puppies. And we're always going to be, you know where to find us. And thank you just isn't enough. So thank you, Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Chairman.
And if you'd like to say anything, that's fine. But if not, we understand.
Well, thank you to everyone. I was definitely surprised and taken aback by this today. It truly has been an honor to serve this body and in particular the Interim Finance Committee. As Chairwoman Carlton indicated, I've been rolling around the state in various positions for 30 years now, as of yesterday. And, you know, starting from a part-time intern, who would have thought I would have ended up where I did at the end of my career. And, you know, I wish you all well. I wish you all wisdom to make great decisions on behalf of the citizens of the state of Nevada. And most everyone knows where to find me. Should you have any questions, and I'm available, you know, to all of you and to the fiscal division for any questions they might have after I leave as well. I am very grateful to be able to serve with a wonderful group of people here at the Fiscal Analysis Division. They are the utmost professionals and utmost fiscal experts in the state. And I can't thank Mr. Krompottek enough for taking me under his wing. It was tough coming from the outside into this position, but I was able to get through it with his support and the support of all my coworkers. And as you know, Sarah, who's been my deputy the past few sessions, is stepping into my role, and I have utmost faith in her ability to serve you all well. She's super bright. She's very caring and kind, and she's so fast at accessing information, you know, on the various systems that we have available to us to find information. So I am confident she will be successful in serving you for the remainder of her career here at the division and in this upcoming session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. So with that, I believe we'll go ahead and have broadcast services. If there is anyone in the queue for public comment, if you would bring them up, please. Thank you.
Chair Carlton, the public line is open and working. There are no callers at this time.
Thank you very much. So we have no public comment today. Thank you again, Ms. Jones, for everything. Committee members, we did pretty good. So with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. Have a wonderful weekend. Stay safe and stay well.